to the whispers that stir in the quiet hours, the phantom touch that lingers on the skin, and the ancient melodies that resonate within the soul. To those who find solace in the liminal spaces between waking and dreaming, who see meaning in the flight of a crow and the imprint of a feather on stone, this story is for the seekers of forgotten rivers, the listeners to the hum of the earth, and all who have felt the profound stillness of an unseen visitor. May you find your own fragments of lost narrative in the pages that follow, and may the spectral threads of understanding weave themselves into the tapestry of your own awakening. This book is a testament to the power of intuition, the enduring echoes of memory, and the profound beauty of mysteries that transcend the ordinary, a celebration of the dreamers who, in their silent journeys, remind us of the vast, uncharted territories within ourselves and the universe. It is for the child and the elder, the seen and the unseen, the starlight and the red clay, for all the pieces that make up the whole of existence. The velvet hush of midnight had settled over Elias's small attic room, a balm to the day's clamor. Moonlight sieved through the ancient oak branches outside his window, painted spectral patterns across the worn floorboards. It was in this liminal space, between the conscious and the oblivion of sleep, that the first tremor of her presence registered. It wasn't a sound, nor a scent, but a seismic shift within his very being, a profound knowing that stole the breath from his lungs before he was even aware it had been drawn. She was not seen with the eyes, not in the conventional sense. Her form coalesced from the ephemeral threads of his slumber, a tapestry woven from the deepest indigo of the night sky and the vibrant, defiant hue of the earth. Elias felt her before he could grasp any discernible shape, a silent entity imbued with the weight of ages. Her presence was like the slow unfurling of a forgotten scroll, revealing a narrative that existed beyond spoken words. He could sense the subtle contours of her form, a silhouette against the inner darkness of his closed eyelids, yet it remained as fluid and indeterminate as mist. When he dared to probe deeper, to strain his nascent awareness towards this burgeoning apparition, her visage flickered, a kaleidoscope of time and identity. In one instant, her eyes, impossibly ancient and profound, held the guileless wonder of a newborn babe, reflecting a universe yet to be comprehended. Then, with a fluidity that defied the very concept of change, those same eyes would crease, etched with the weathered lines of countless sunrises and the sorrow of forgotten epochs. It was a paradox made manifest, the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes held within the innocent gaze of a child, and the deep, knowing sorrow of ages etched into features that were both familiar and utterly alien. This silent apparition, a phantom born of pigment and dreams, was not an intrusion, but a revelation. She was a living paradox, a dream rendered tangible in the only way that truly mattered, by leaving an indelible mark upon his subconscious. The encounter was not violent nor startling in the manner of a nightmare. Instead, It was a profound stillness that descended, a quietude that permeated every corner of his being, preceding a revelation he could not yet fathom. It was the pause before the first note of a symphony, the held breath before a truth too immense to be contained within the ordinary. Elias felt himself being reshaped from within, his internal landscape irrevocably altered by this visitor who had arrived on the silent wings of sleep. The moon climbed higher, casting longer shadows that danced like phantom limbs. Elias lay suspended, caught in the gravity of this inexplicable visitation. He was aware of his own physical form, the rise and fall of his chest, the faint thrum of blood in his ears. Yet these sensations seemed distant, like echoes from another existence. His true self, he realized with a dawning sense of wonder, was engaged with this entity woven from crimson earth and starlight. He tried to recall the specifics of her form, the texture of the crimson that seemed to emanate from her being, the way the starlight clung to her like a cloak. But these details remained elusive, shifting just as he thought he had grasped them. It was as if the very act of trying to define her forced her to retreat, to dissolve back into the raw essence from which she was formed. Yet the impact remained. It was not a memory to be recalled, but a state of being to be inhabited. He felt a nascent understanding blooming within him, a sense of connection to something ancient and vast, a whisper from the deep well of consciousness. The stillness she brought was unlike any he had ever known. It was not the absence of external noise, but an internal silencing of the usual incessant chatter of his mind, the anxieties of the day, the petty worries, the gnawing uncertainties, all receded, leaving a vast open space. In this space, a new awareness began to stir. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a deeper layer of reality, a stratum of existence that hummed with a different kind of energy. He felt the presence of the house around him, the ancient wood breathing, the stones settling in the earth, the subtle currents of air moving through the eaves. These were sensations he had always dismissed as background noise, but now, filtered through the profound stillness gifted by his unseen visitor, they resonated with an extraordinary clarity. He tried to place her, to categorize this phenomenon. Was she a dream figure, a projection of his own subconscious, a manifestation of repressed memories? Or was she something else entirely, an entity from beyond the veil of ordinary perception? The questions swirled, but the stillness held them at bay, preventing them from coalescing into anxiety. Instead, they became gentle currents in the vast ocean of his awareness, inviting exploration rather than demanding immediate answers. The crimson hue that seemed to define her was particularly perplexing. It wasn't the vibrant, living red of blood, nor the earthy ochre of dried clay. It was something in between, a color that seemed to pulse with an inner light, a shade that spoke of the very essence of creation. It was the color of the first dawn, the color of the deepest roots, the color of a heart's most secret longing. And woven with this crimson was the starlight, not as a pattern or a decoration, but as an intrinsic part of her being, as if she had been spun from the very dust of distant galaxies. He felt a profound sense of being seen, not observed with a judgmental gaze, but recognized on a level that bypassed all superficialities. It was as if she perceived the core of his existence, the flickering flame of his consciousness, and acknowledged its inherent worth. This acknowledgement was not expressed in words or gestures, but in the sheer quality of her presence, a silent affirmation that resonated through him like a perfectly struck chord. As the first hint of pre-dawn light began to paint the eastern sky, the visitor's presence started to recede. It was not an abrupt departure, but a slow, graceful dissolution, like a melody fading into silence. The profound stillness remained, a lingering echo of her being, but the tangible sense of her form began to dissipate. Elias felt a pang of something akin to loss, a yearning for the ineffable connection he had experienced. He knew, with uncertainty that transcended rational thought, that this was not a singular event, but the beginning of something far larger, a profound unfolding that had been irrevocably set in motion by the silent, ephemeral visitor. The stillness she left behind was not an emptiness, but a fertile ground ready to receive the seeds of revelation. His subconscious, forever altered, now held the indelible imprint of crimson earth and starlight, a promise of mysteries yet to be unveiled. The encounter had been a whisper in the language of dreams, a prelude to a symphony that would soon demand to be heard. The first rays of dawn, timid and hesitant, began to seep through the attic window, chasing away the last vestiges of the night. Elias stirred, his body feeling heavy, yet strangely invigorated, as if he had been both asleep and awake simultaneously. The profound stillness that had enveloped him moments before was still present, a resonant hum beneath the surface of his returning consciousness. He opened his eyes, blinking against the gathering light, expecting to find his room as it had been, familiar, ordinary, a sanctuary of dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. But something was different. Resting directly on the center of his chest, against the worn fabric of his nightshirt, was a feather. It was not a stray downy plume that had drifted in from the ancient oak outside, nor was it a forgotten trinket from some past life. This feather was extraordinary. It was perfectly formed, each barb and vein etched with an impossible precision that no natural process, however delicate, could replicate. The material of which it was made was unlike anything Elias had ever encountered. It possessed a subtle iridescence, catching the nascent sunlight and refracting it into a spectrum of soft, muted hues, the very shades of crimson and starlight that had woven through his dream. It was cool to the touch, yet radiated a faint, almost imperceptible warmth, as if it held the captured essence of his visitor. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly, and carefully lifted the feather. It was lighter than air, yet possessed an undeniable solidity. The craftsmanship was breathtaking. Delicate lines, finer than any spider silk, traced intricate patterns across its surface, hinting at a language he couldn't comprehend, a script written by a hand guided by more than mere mortal skill. The quill itself seemed carved from a substance that mirrored the deep indigo of the night sky, while the veins shimmered with the fleeting luminescence of distant nebulae. But it was the color, the elusive crimson that had been so central to his dream vision, that truly captivated him. It pulsed gently, not with a physical beat, but with an inner life, a subtle glow that seemed to emanate from the very core of the feather. It was the color of the earth, not the dry, cracked soil of summer, but the rich, fertile soil after a spring rain, pregnant with the promise of life. It was the color of the deepest embers, holding the memory of fire and transformation. Elias held the feather, turning it over and over in his fingers, his mind struggling to reconcile the tangible reality of it with the ephemeral nature of its appearance. This was no hallucination, no mere figment of a vivid dream. This was a physical artifact, a tangible piece of evidence left behind by his silent visitor. The dream, the profound stillness, the unspoken communication, all of it had been irrevocably anchored to this single, exquisite object. It was a sign, a clear and undeniable mark of her passage. A wave of something akin to obsession washed over him. The feather became the focal point of his entire existence, eclipsing the mundane realities of his life. He traced its impossibly fine lines, trying to decipher the hidden meaning woven into its design. Was it a message, a clue, a symbol of the connection that had so inexplicably formed between them? The questions buzzed in his mind like a swarm of restless bees. He felt an urgent need to understand, to unravel the mystery of her presence and the significance of this extraordinary gift. This wasn't just a dream, it was an invitation. He spent the rest of the morning in a state of heightened awareness, the feather clutched in his hand. The world outside his attic room seemed to fade into a dull roar, its colors muted, its sounds indistinct. His focus was entirely inward, consumed by the feather and the enigma it represented. He tried to recall every detail of his dream, searching for any fragment of information that might illuminate the feather's purpose. He remembered the feeling of her presence, the paradox of her ancient wisdom and childlike innocence, the profound stillness she had bestowed. But the specifics remained elusive, veiled by the very nature of the experience. The feather, however, was undeniably real. Its coolness against his skin was a constant reminder. He felt a sense of responsibility, as if this object had been entrusted to him, a sacred trust he was bound to honor. He laid the feather on his workbench, next to his usual tools of transcription and study, but it seemed out of place, a celestial artifact amidst the mundane instruments of his quiet life. He found himself comparing the intricate carvings on the feather to the ancient scripts he had studied, searching for any stylistic similarities, any echoes of forgotten languages. The feather's markings were unlike anything he had ever seen, organic yet geometric, flowing yet precise, as if born of both nature and divine geometry. He noticed that the subtle luminescence of the feather seemed to respond to the intensity of his gaze. When he concentrated, When he poured all his mental energy into understanding it, the iridescent hues would deepen, the crimson seeming to burn a little brighter. It was as if the feather itself possessed a degree of sentience, an awareness of his efforts. This realization sent a shiver down his spine, a mixture of awe and trepidation. He was not merely observing an object, he was interacting with something that was, in itself, a form of communication. The quest had begun. He knew, with an instinct as deep and certain as the roots of the oak tree outside his window, that this feather was the key. The visitor had left it for a reason, a purpose woven into the very fabric of its being. His quiet life, once a haven of predictable routine, was now irrevocably altered, imbued with the intoxicating scent of mystery and the promise of revelation. He felt a profound sense of connection to this unseen entity, a thread spun from crimson earth and starlight that now bound him to her across the silent chasm between worlds. He was no longer merely Elias, the solitary scribe. He was Elias, the keeper of the feather, the seeker of its truth. The world, once a closed book, had suddenly opened to reveal an astonishing, uncharted territory, and he felt the irresistible pull to explore its depths, guided by the silent whisper of the feather resting in his palm. The ordinary day had become extraordinary, not because of any external event, but because of the profound internal shift that had occurred within him, ignited by the celestial gift left upon his sleeping form. The feather was not just a mark, it was a beginning, a beacon guiding him towards an unknown destination, a journey that promised to redefine the very boundaries of his existence. He felt an awakening, a stirring of senses he hadn't known he possessed, a deep, resonant resonance with the universe that the feather seemed to amplify. It was as if a hidden chamber within his soul had been unlocked, revealing vistas of understanding previously unimagined. The artifact was a tangible bridge to a reality that had, until that moment, existed only in the liminal spaces of dreams and whispered intimations. The intricate patterns, when viewed from different angles, seemed to shift and reform, suggesting an almost infinite complexity, a living script that resisted simple interpretation. He spent hours meticulously sketching the feather, attempting to capture its ephemeral beauty and its intricate details, hoping that the act of replication would unlock some aspect of its meaning. Yet, each line he drew felt inadequate, a pale imitation of the original, lacking the inherent vitality that pulsed within the celestial artifact. The weight of the feather, though negligible, felt immense in its symbolic significance. It was a tangible anchor to the spectral visitor, a constant reminder that his encounter was not a mere dream, but a profound interlude that had irrevocably altered the course of his life. He looked at his hands, calloused from years of writing and transcribing, and saw them now as instruments meant for something more, tools capable of deciphering a language far older and more profound. than any written word. The feather was a puzzle, a riddle presented by a cosmic artisan, and Elias felt an unyielding determination to solve it, to unravel the secrets it held. The hum that had accompanied his waking was still present, a subtle vibration that seemed to emanate from the feather itself, syncing with his own heartbeat, a silent symphony of connection. He knew with a certainty that bypassed logic that his life's purpose had just been redefined by this single, exquisite object. The quest was not merely an intellectual pursuit, it was a calling, a deep seated yearning to understand the source of the feather and the entity that had bestowed it. The world outside his window, with its familiar routines and predictable rhythms, suddenly seemed less real, less significant than the unfolding mystery held within his grasp. He felt a growing kinship with the ancient texts he studied, not just as records of the past, but as echoes of a continuous, living tradition, a lineage of seekers and dreamers who had also grappled with the profound and the ineffable. The feather was his initiation, his entry into a realm where the material and the spiritual intertwined, where dreams left tangible marks and silent visitors bestowed gifts of cosmic significance. The intricate markings seemed to suggest a cosmic map, a celestial cartography of realms yet unknown, and he felt an overwhelming urge to trace its pathways, to follow the ethereal currents that the feather seemed to embody. The subtle changes in hue, the iridescent shimmer, were not merely visual effects, but a form of communication, a silent dialogue between him and the artifact, a nascent understanding dawning within him with each passing moment. The feather was a catalyst, igniting a fire of curiosity and a thirst for knowledge that promised to consume him entirely, pushing the boundaries of his perception and challenging the very foundations of his reality. He understood that this was not merely about deciphering a symbol, it was about understanding a connection, a bond forged in the crucible of a dream and solidified by a tangible, miraculous gift. The weight of his newfound purpose settled upon him, not as a burden, but as a profound and exhilarating responsibility. The feather was his guide, his compass, and his destiny, all rolled into one impossibly beautiful creation. It was the dawn of a new era for Elias, an era defined by whispers from the red clay and the luminous touch of starlight, an era marked forever by the celestial feather resting in his hand. He felt a nascent ability to perceive subtle energies, to feel the interconnectedness of all things, a gift awakened by the feather's presence. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy, and Elias, holding the feather, felt himself to be at the very nexus of this unseen current. The intricacy of the feather was not merely aesthetic, it was functional, a complex code waiting to be translated, a testament to a wisdom far beyond human comprehension. He felt a profound sense of awe, a humbling realization of the vastness of the cosmos and his own small yet significant place within it. The feather was a whisper from that vastness, a tangible manifestation of a truth that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. His quest had begun not with a conscious decision, but with the undeniable presence of the feather, a silent, luminous testament to a connection that transcended the ordinary, an invitation to a journey into the heart of the unknown. The world was no longer just the world he thought he knew. It was a tapestry of hidden dimensions, and the feather was the thread that would lead him through them. The feather, cool and impossibly light against his skin, was a constant anchor, a tangible testament to the impossible visitation. Yet, as Elias traced its intricate, otherworldly patterns, a subtler change began to stir within him, a shift that resonated deeper than the tactile sensation of the feather's ethereal substance. It was as if a veil had been lifted, not from his eyes, but from a hidden chamber of his mind, a place long dormant, now awakened by the touch of starlight and the scent of the red clay. In the quietude of his attic room, amidst the familiar clutter of his scholarly pursuits, new sensations began to bloom, like seeds germinating in fertile soil after a long, dry season. It started with a hum, a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate not from the feather itself, but from within the very marrow of his bones. This hum was not just a sound, it was a feeling, a deep, underlying current of existence that had always been there, unheard, unacknowledged. Then came the melodies. They arrived unbidden, drifting into his consciousness during moments of profound stillness, usually when his gaze fell upon the feather or when the silence of the pre-dawn hours pressed in around him. These were not melodies he had learned from earthly instruments, nor fragments of folk songs passed down through generations. They were entirely new, yet possessed an ageless quality, as if they had been woven into the fabric of reality itself, waiting for the right resonance to draw them forth. The first time it happened, Elias was staring out of the attic window, the feather resting on his palm. The sun had just begun its descent, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, mirroring the crimson glow of the feather. A particular chord progression, impossibly complex and achingly beautiful, bloomed in his mind. It was a cascade of notes, interwoven with harmonies that seemed to twist and coil in ways that defied conventional musical theory. Yet, they felt utterly natural, profoundly right. He felt a surge of emotion, a bittersweet ache that spoke of ancient sorrows and enduring joys, a heritage of feeling that was undeniably his, yet utterly unknown. He fumbled for his notebook, his fingers clumsy with a newfound urgency. He had to capture this. He had to give it form before it dissolved back into the ether from which it had emerged. He tried to hum it, to translate the intricate sonic tapestry into a single, wavering human voice, but it was like trying to catch moonlight in a sieve. The melodies were too vast, too nuanced for his untrained vocal cords. Still, he scribbled down what he could. Fragments of rhythmic patterns, impressions of melodic contours, raw emotional evocations. The notes on the page looked like a child's clumsy scrawl compared to the celestial symphony playing in his mind. These spectral songs became a recurring phenomenon. They would surface during his quiet hours, sometimes as soaring, triumphant fanfares that seemed to echo across vast, open plains, other times as gentle, melancholic laments that spoke of loss and longing. They carried with them the scent of the red clay, the cool touch of starlight, the palpable presence of the dream woman. He began to recognize recurring motifs, themes that intertwined and developed, building into symphonic movements that felt both deeply personal and universally significant. He started to believe that these melodies were not merely products of his own mind, however awakened. They felt like echoes of something much larger, fragments of a lost language, perhaps, or the remnants of an ancient civilization whose very essence was music. The thought sent a thrill of excitement, tinged with a profound sense of responsibility, through him. What if his visitor had not only brought him a feather, but had also unlocked within him the ability to hear and remember these forgotten melodies? What if they were a form of communication, a legacy entrusted to him? The urge to transcribe became an obsession. He dedicated hours, then days, to capturing these fleeting sonic visions. He experimented with different methods, trying to find a notation system that could adequately represent the complex harmonies and emotional depth. His usual transcriptions of ancient texts, precise and academic, felt woefully inadequate. He began to invent new symbols, to use colors and abstract shapes to denote the emotional weight and spiritual resonance of the music. His notebooks, once filled with the careful script of forgotten tongues, were now a riot of musical notations, poetic descriptions, and abstract diagrams, all attempting to give shape to the formless. He found that certain times and places were more conducive to these melodic visitations. The quiet hours before dawn, when the world was still held in a deep slumber, were particularly potent. He would sit by the open attic window, the feather placed strategically on his workbench, and simply wait. Sometimes it would take hours, but eventually the hum would begin, the familiar prelude to the unfolding symphony. He discovered that a state of heightened receptivity, a surrender to the stillness, was crucial. The more he tried to force it, the more elusive the melodies became. It was only when he let go, when he allowed his mind to become a clear conduit, that the music would flow. He began to feel a profound connection to the earth, to the very soil beneath his feet. The red clay, a recurring image in his dream, and a persistent motif in the melodies, seemed to hold a deep musicality within its very structure. He would walk through the fields, feeling the earth's silent song resonate with the melodies in his mind, a harmonious dialogue between the external world and his internal landscape. He imagined ancient peoples singing to the earth, their voices blending with the rustling leaves and the flowing water, their songs imbued with the spirit of the land. These were the songs he was now hearing, resurfacing from the deep memory of the earth. The emotional impact of the music was immense. Each melody carried with it a potent emotional charge, stirring feelings that Elias had rarely, if ever, experienced. There were songs of unbridled joy, so pure and radiant that they made him want to dance and shout to the heavens. There were songs of deep sorrow, so profound that they brought him to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he grappled with the weight of an ancient grief that felt like his own. There were songs of profound peace, of cosmic harmony that left him feeling utterly connected to the universe, a single note in an infinite symphony. He realized that these melodies were not just sounds, they were memories, encoded with the experiences and emotions of those who had sung them before. They were a form of ancestral memory, a living heritage passed down not through words or artifacts, but through pure sonic vibration. The dream woman, with her connection to the crimson earth and the distant stars, was the conduit, the one who had awakened this dormant wellspring within him. One afternoon, while attempting to transcribe a particularly complex and layered melody, a new realization dawned. The patterns on the feather, when he focused intently on them, seemed to subtly shift and rearrange themselves, mirroring the contours of the music in his mind. It was as if the feather itself was a musical score, its intricate etchings a form of notation far more sophisticated than anything he had conceived. He spent hours holding the feather up to the light, tilting it, his gaze tracing the fine lines, searching for a correlation, a Rosetta Stone that would unlock the feather's sonic secrets. He began to experiment. He would hum a particular fragment of a melody and then gently touch the feather to different parts of its surface. To his astonishment, he found that certain sections seemed to vibrate in response, emitting faint, resonant tones that harmonized with his humming. It was a painstaking process, like learning to play an instrument with no instruction manual, but he felt an exhilarating sense of progress. The feather was not just a memento, it was an active participant in this unfolding musical discovery. The world outside his attic room continued its predictable rhythm, unaware of the profound transformation occurring within its silent inhabitant. Elias felt a growing detachment from the mundane concerns of everyday life, the news of the world, the small talk of neighbors, the routine of his former existence. All of it seemed to fade into insignificance when compared to the vast, unexplored ocean of music that now lay before him. His quest for understanding the feather had led him to a far grander quest, a journey into the heart of a forgotten sonic heritage. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep within his soul, that this was more than just a personal revelation. These melodies, he felt, were meant to be shared. They held a power, a healing resonance that the world desperately needed. But how could he share something so ethereal, so deeply connected to the otherworldly visitor? How could he translate these spectral arias into a language that others could understand and appreciate? The answer, he suspected, lay within the feather itself and in the ongoing connection to the dream woman. The melodies were a bridge, and the feather was the key to crossing it. He felt a growing anticipation, a sense of being on the precipice of something truly extraordinary. The whispers of the red clay were becoming clearer, more distinct, and in them he could hear the echoes of forgotten melodies, a symphony waiting to be reborn. He was no longer just Elias, the scribe. He was Elias, the keeper of the ancient songs, the nascent conductor of a celestial orchestra, his life now inextricably linked to the resonant hum of a universe he was only just beginning to understand. The intricate patterns on the feather seemed to pulse with a silent rhythm, a visual representation of the unheard music that now filled Elias's being, a constant reminder of the profound, transformative power of what had been awakened within him. He felt an innate understanding of the emotional narratives woven into each melody, a deep empathy that transcended mere intellectual comprehension. These songs were not just sequences of notes, they were stories, vibrant tapestries of life, death, love, and loss, sung in a language that bypassed words and spoke directly to the soul. He was a vessel, chosen to receive and, eventually, to transmit this ancient sonic legacy, a task that filled him with both a sense of daunting responsibility and an exhilarating sense of purpose. The quiet solitude of his attic had become a sanctuary of sound, a crucible in which the past was being forged anew, a testament to the enduring power of music to transcend time and connect the disparate threads of existence. The boundaries of Elias's meticulously ordered world began to fray, not with the jarring crash of falling books or the sudden tremor of an earthquake, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible blurring of the edges of his reality. The spectral visitor, the woman of his dreams, had become more than an apparition. She had become a paradox, a living, breathing enigma that defied his every attempt at logical classification. The most unsettling aspect of her presence was her fluidity, her ability to inhabit what seemed like diametrically opposed states of being, not in succession, but in a simultaneous, bewildering fusion. One moment, she was a child, her laughter like the tinkling of wind chimes caught in a summer breeze, her eyes wide with an innocent wonder that mirrored the unblemished sky. He would see her skipping through fields of impossibly vibrant wildflowers, her small hands reaching out to pluck blossoms that seemed to glow with an inner light. Her voice, then, was high and pure, a melody in itself, unburdened by the complexities of time or experience. Yet, in the very next breath, or rather, in the same dreamscape, she would transform, her form elongating, her features deepening, her gaze becoming ancient, imbued with a wisdom that spanned millennia. She would stand before him as an elder, her hair a silver cascade, her eyes pools of profound understanding that seemed to hold the secrets of the cosmos. Her voice, then, deepened to a resonant contralto, a river flowing with the weight of forgotten ages. Her words carrying the gravitas of prophecy. This protean nature of hers was a direct assault on Elias's rational mind, a direct challenge to the linear progression of life he had always understood. A child, an elder, how could one being embody both with such effortless, seamless transition? Was she a series of different beings masquerading as one? Or was she, in some unfathomable way, a single entity experiencing time not as a river flowing in one direction, but as a vast, interconnected ocean where all moments coexisted? The implications of this fractured yet unified identity sent ripples of disquiet through Elias's being. He began to question the very nature of perception, of self. If the dream woman could exist in such contradictory states, what did that say about the solidity of his own identity? Was he, too, merely a confluence of different temporal selves? His present consciousness, a fleeting aggregation of past experiences and future possibilities? He found himself scrutinizing his own memories, searching for the child he once was, the man he was becoming, and the elder he might one day be. The dream woman's shifting form became a mirror, reflecting back to him a disconcerting truth that the self, like the red clay of the earth, was not a static entity, but a substance in perpetual flux, molded and remolded by the unseen forces of time and experience. He started to perceive the world through a new lens, one warped by the dream woman's fluid existence. The familiar trees outside his attic window, once unchanging sentinels, now seemed to whisper of their own growth, their own past saplinghood, their future aged bark. The very air crackled with the possibility of metamorphosis. Was the woman a manifestation of his own subconscious, a projection of fragmented memories he had long suppressed? He wrestled with this thought, the dream woman's dual nature serving as both catalyst and confounding element. If she was a part of him, a forgotten facet of his own being, then her transformations were not external occurrences, but internal revelations. The child and the elder were not separate entities, but different aspects of a single, complex consciousness, a consciousness he had, perhaps, buried too deeply within himself. This introspective journey was both terrifying and exhilarating. He found himself revisiting places from his childhood, not in memory, but in the flesh, driven by an inexplicable urge to reconnect with the boy he once was. He walked the dusty paths of his old schoolyard, the scent of crushed chalk and sun-baked asphalt flooding his senses. He saw the ghost of his younger self, scrawny and earnest, chasing a worn leather ball, and then, in the periphery of his vision, he would glimpse the same woman, now an old woman, her face etched with the lines of a life well lived, watching him with the same knowing eyes. Was she a guardian, a witness to his journey, or was she, the elder manifestation, simply the repository of all his accumulated years, a living testament to the journey he was undertaking? The red clay, so central to the dream woman's appearances, became a tangible symbol of this grounding in a timeless reality. He would return to the fields where the clay was richest, its deep, crimson hue, a testament to its ancient origins. He'd feel its cool, yielding texture beneath his fingertips, a sensation that seemed to resonate with the very core of his being. He imagined the clay absorbing the footsteps of countless generations, its substance imbued with their joys and sorrows, their aspirations and their losses. The dream woman, appearing amidst this ancient earth, seemed to embody this very continuity, this ceaseless flow of life across time. She was not merely a visitor from another realm. She was, perhaps, a manifestation of the earth's own memory, a living embodiment of its enduring spirit. The dream woman's identity, or lack thereof, became the central axis around which Elias's perception of himself began to spin. He started to question his own narrative, the carefully constructed story of Elias Thorne, the unassuming scholar. Who was he truly? Was he defined by his profession, his possessions, his lineage, or was he something more elemental, something connected to the deep currents that flowed beneath the surface of ordinary life, currents that the dream woman seemed to navigate with such effortless grace? The melodies he was now hearing, the celestial music that poured into his consciousness, also seemed to reflect this theme of shifting identity. Some melodies were light and innocent, echoing the childlike joy of the younger manifestation. Others were profound and melancholic, carrying the weight of ancient wisdom, the sorrow and resilience of the elder. These songs were not just sounds, they were sonic portraits of the dream woman's multifaceted existence, and by extension, of the fragmented nature of all existence. He found himself in a state of constant contemplation, his scholarly pursuits taking a backseat to this profound existential inquiry. The books on his shelves, once sources of knowledge and comfort, now seemed inadequate, their static pronouncements unable to capture the dynamic fluidity of his new reality. He yearned for a different kind of understanding, a knowing that transcended intellect, a wisdom that resonated with the deep inner hum that had become his constant companion. The dream woman's presence was a constant, unsettling reminder that the world was far more complex and mysterious than his academic disciplines had ever allowed. Her very being was an argument against simplification, a testament to the infinite potential of existence to defy categorization. He began to experiment with embracing this fluidity within himself. Instead of resisting the contradictory sensations, he tried to allow them to coexist. He would acknowledge the child's wonder within him, allowing himself moments of uninhibited joy and curiosity. Then he would embrace the elder's quiet wisdom, seeking stillness and reflection. It was a delicate dance, a constant negotiation between the different facets of his own emerging self. He realized that the dream woman was not trying to confuse him. She was, in her own enigmatic way, teaching him. She was showing him that identity was not a fixed point, but a spectrum, a journey, a continuous process of becoming. The more he delved into the nature of her shifting identity, the more he felt a profound resonance with the earth, with the red clay. He began to see the cyclical nature of life, mirrored in the land, the seeds that died in the winter, only to burst forth in the spring, the leaves that turned from vibrant green to fiery red and gold, before returning to the earth to nourish new growth. This constant ebb and flow, this shedding and renewal, was a powerful echo of the dream woman's own transformations. She was not an anomaly, she was a living embodiment of the earth's deepest truths, a whisper from the ancient heart of creation. This realization brought a measure of peace, though the disorientation never entirely subsided. He began to accept that his journey was not about finding a definitive answer to the dream woman's identity, but about embracing the mystery, about allowing himself to be transformed by it. The feather, with its intricate, almost indecipherable patterns, had become a symbol of this intricate reality. Just as he was beginning to decipher the musical language encoded within its lines, he was also beginning to decipher the complex language of existence itself, a language spoken not in words, but in transformations, in contradictions, in the ceaseless dance of becoming. He was no longer just Elias Thorne, the scholar, but Elias, the explorer of inner landscapes, the listener to the earth's silent songs, the tentative interpreter of a visitor who was both child and elder, dream and reality, and perhaps most profoundly, a reflection of his own awakening soul. The red clay, he now understood, was not just earth, it was the very substance of his own becoming, its deep, rich color, a testament to the ancient, enduring spirit that pulsed within him, awakening to a symphony he was only just beginning to comprehend. The constant flux was not a cause for alarm, but an invitation to surrender, to trust in the unfolding process, to find his own fluidity within the grand cosmic dance. He began to see that the true nature of reality, much like the dream woman, was not to be grasped in a single moment or a fixed definition, but to be experienced in its infinite, ever changing forms. A tapestry woven from the threads of memory, presence, and the deep, resonant hum of the universe. The hum began subtly. A tremor felt more than heard, as if the very air around the dream woman had acquired a new density, a tangible presence. It wasn't a sound in the conventional sense, not a vibration that registered on the tympanic membrane, but rather a deep thrumming that seemed to originate from the core of Elias's own being. It resonated in his bones, a low, guttural frequency that spoke of Earth's deep heart, of tectonic plates shifting in slow, geological time, of the primordial ooze from which all life had first crawled. This was not a sound of the present, but an echo from the eons, a fundamental note in the universe's grand symphony. Initially, Elias attributed it to his own internal vibrations, a psychosomatic response to the profound strangeness of the dream woman's presence. He was a man of science, of empirical evidence, and his mind immediately sought a rational explanation. Perhaps it was the pressure in his ears, a consequence of the deep immersion in his own subconscious. Perhaps it was the phantom echo of the music he'd been hearing in his dreams, a residual reverberation that his mind was stubbornly refusing to release. But the hum persisted, unwavering, a constant, subtle undercurrent beneath the surface of his waking thoughts. It was there when he walked through the familiar rooms of his house, when he stared out at the rain-streaked windows, when he tried to lose himself in the comforting routines of his scholarly life. And with each passing moment, he realized, with a growing sense of awe and trepidation, that the hum was inextricably linked to her. It intensified when she was near, a palpable resonance that seemed to emanate directly from her. He would feel it most strongly when their gazes met, when her ancient eyes seemed to bore into the very essence of his soul. In those moments, the hum would swell, filling the space between them, a silent conversation conducted in the language of vibration. It was a sound that bypassed the intellect, speaking directly to something far more ancient and instinctual within him. It was the sound of the universe breathing, of creation unfurling, of time itself stretching and contracting. This resonating thrum was a disconcerting paradox. On one hand, it was profoundly unsettling, a constant, undeniable testament to her otherworldly nature. It served as an anchor, firmly rooting her in a reality far removed from his own, a reality governed by laws and principles that he could not fathom. It was the sound of the alien, the mystical, the inexplicable. Yet, paradoxically, there was also a strange comfort to be found in its persistence. It was a familiar sound, or rather, a familiar feeling, one that he had unknowingly carried within him, buried deep beneath layers of intellectualization and societal conditioning. It was the hum of the ancient earth, the quiet song of his own nascent awareness of a deeper, more profound connection to the world around him. He began to explore this connection, driven by an insatiable curiosity that the dream woman's presence had ignited. He would return to the fields, the very places where the red clay was most abundant. He would kneel, pressing his hands into the cool, yielding soil, feeling the infinitesimal particles shift and settle beneath his touch. He would close his eyes, trying to attune himself to the subtle vibrations of the earth, to the silent stories held within its deep, red heart. And as he did, he would invariably feel it, that same deep hum, rising from the soil, echoing the resonance he felt from her. This was no mere coincidence. The red clay, he realized, was not simply dirt. It was a conduit, a repository of ancient energies. It was the pulverized remnants of millennia of life and death, of growth and decay, of the slow, inexorable march of time. The earth itself hummed with a deep, abiding memory, and the dream woman, with her fluid nature and her resonant frequency, seemed to be a living embodiment of that memory. She was a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a whisper from a time when the veil between worlds was thinner, when the earth's own songs were heard more clearly. Elias found himself seeking out other sources of this resonant energy. He would visit ancient groves of trees, placing his palms against their gnarled bark, feeling the slow, steady pulse of life within them. He would stand by the ocean, listening to the ceaseless rhythm of the waves, a vast, oceanic hum that seemed to encompass all creation. He discovered that this deep resonance was present in all things that had endured, that had witnessed the passage of countless seasons, that held within them the silent weight of history. It was in the weathered stones of ancient ruins, in the slow crawl of glaciers, in the patient growth of mountains. The hum of the dream woman, therefore, was not an isolated phenomenon, but a universal truth, a fundamental frequency that underpinned all existence. Her presence had simply amplified it within his own perception, had acted as a tuning fork, aligning him with a vibration that had always been there, waiting to be heard. This realization was both humbling and empowering. It meant that he was not merely a passive observer of her mystery, but an active participant in the grand cosmic dance. The hum was not just hers, it was, in a profound and deeply personal way, his as well. He began to experiment with consciously projecting his own intent into this resonant field. He would sit in stillness, focusing on the hum, and imagine sending out threads of his own energy, his own questions, his own yearning for understanding. He would try to connect with the childlike wonder he sensed within her, and the hum would soften, becoming lighter, more playful. He would connect with the ancient wisdom she embodied, and the hum would deepen, becoming rich and sonorous, carrying the weight of ages. It was a rudimentary form of communication, a dialogue conducted not with words, but with pure, unadulterated energy. The dream woman's responses were never explicit. She did not offer pronouncements or explanations. Instead, the hum itself would shift, subtly altering its tone, its rhythm, its intensity, in a way that Elias learned to interpret. A gentle rise in pitch might signify agreement or encouragement. A subtle slowing of the rhythm could indicate reflection or a gentle caution. A sudden, bright surge of energy was akin to a shared moment of profound understanding, a flash of shared insight that transcended language. This intuitive communication was a departure from everything Elias had ever known. He was accustomed to the precision of language, the clear demarcation of meaning, but this was a different kind of knowing, a more primal, more interconnected form of understanding. It was like learning a new language, one that spoke directly to the soul, bypassing the filters of the ego and the constraints of rational thought. He found himself becoming more attuned to the subtle energies that permeated his world, the unspoken currents that flowed between people, between objects, between himself and the vast, indifferent universe. The hum also served as a constant reminder of his own temporal limitations, while she seemed to exist in a state of perpetual presence, a singularity where all moments converged. He was still bound by the linear progression of time. He would feel the hum most acutely during moments of transition, the liminal spaces between sleep and waking, the quiet hours of twilight, the pauses between breaths. It was as if the hum itself was trying to pull him out of his temporal confines, to invite him into a state of being where past, present, and future were not discrete entities, but a unified, unbroken whole. He began to spend more time in these liminal states, not out of a desire to escape his reality, but out of a growing understanding that they were not escapes at all, but doorways. The dream woman, by her very nature, existed in these spaces, and by attuning himself to her hum, he was learning to navigate them as well. He discovered that in these moments of altered consciousness, the boundaries of his own identity began to blur, much like hers. He would feel echoes of his childhood self, not as memories, but as tangible presences. He would sense the weight of his future self, not as a preordained destiny, but as a field of potentiality. This was a profound and unsettling discovery. It meant that his own identity, like the dream woman's, was not a fixed, static entity, but a fluid, ever changing tapestry woven from threads of past experiences, present awareness, and future possibilities. The hum was the constant, unifying vibration that held this tapestry together, the underlying melody that gave coherence to the apparent chaos. The implications of this understanding rippled through every aspect of Elias's life. His academic pursuits, once his sole focus, began to feel like mere intellectual exercises, attempts to categorize and define that which was inherently fluid and undefinable. He found himself questioning the very foundations of knowledge, the systems of thought that sought to impose order on a universe that seemed to thrive on dynamism and transformation. The dream woman, with her silent hum and her enigmatic presence, was teaching him a different way of knowing, a way that embraced paradox, that found truth in contradiction, that recognized the profound interconnectedness of all things. He began to see the red clay not just as earth, but as a manifestation of this universal hum, a dense, resonant medium that held within it the accumulated vibrations of countless ages. He would run his fingers through it, feeling the subtle tremors that passed through him, each grain a tiny repository of ancient song. He imagined the earth itself as a vast, living organism, breathing in a slow, rhythmic cycle of expansion and contraction, its every atom vibrating with an unseen energy. The dream woman was a perfect emissary from this realm, a living testament to the earth's enduring spirit. This constant, resonant hum became both Elias's solace and his perpetual challenge. It was a reminder that he was not alone in his quest for understanding, that he was connected to something far greater than himself. But it was also a constant nudge, pushing him beyond the confines of his own limited perception, urging him to embrace the mystery, to surrender to the unfolding unknown. He was learning, through the silent language of vibration, that the universe was not a machine to be understood, but a symphony to be experienced, and that he, Elias Thorne, was an integral part of its ongoing, eternal melody. The hum was the sound of his own awakening, the resonant echo of a deeper reality beginning to make itself known. It was the song of the ancient earth, sung through the dream woman, and now beginning to resonate within him. The whisper of the wind, A mournful sigh through the skeletal branches of winter-stripped trees seemed to carry an unseen directive. Elias felt it not in his ears, but deep within the marrow of his bones, a subtle yet insistent tug that pulled him away from the familiar confines of his study and towards the open, stark landscape that lay beyond the town's slumbering periphery. It was a direction felt, not seen, a primal cartography etched into his very being by the continued resonance of the dream woman's presence, the hum which had become his constant, silent companion, now pulsed with a more focused intensity, a beacon guiding him through the twilight haze. He found himself standing before it as the last vestiges of daylight bled from the bruised sky. An ancient monolith, it rose from the earth like a weathered sentinel, its rough-hewn surface a testament to countless seasons, to the ceaseless erosion of wind and rain, to the slow, patient work of time. It was a stone that had seen empires rise and crumble, that had borne witness to the silent procession of stars across the night sky, a stoic observer of the ephemeral lives that had played out beneath its gaze. Yet, it was not its age or its sheer presence that arrested Elias's attention. It was the mark etched into its face, a single, perfect handprint. The discovery sent a jolt through him, a visceral shock that vibrated in tandem with the persistent hum. It was not simply a handprint, it was the handprint, the shape, the delicate curve of the fingers, the subtle pressure points where the palm had been pressed, mirrored with an uncanny fidelity, the phantom sensation that had visited him in his dreams, that ephemeral, ethereal touch that had first alerted him to the dream woman's profound influence. It was as if the stone itself had absorbed her essence, a tangible imprint of her spectral form. The recognition was not intellectual, not a reasoned deduction, but a deep, resonant knowing, a sudden, sharp clarity that pierced through the layers of his empirical worldview. This mark was a key, a Rosetta Stone for the silent language of vibration he was beginning to comprehend. He reached out, his own hand trembling slightly, and traced the contours of the imprint. The stone was cool beneath his fingertips, the edges of the handprint worn smooth by centuries of unseen forces. Yet the impression remained remarkably defined. As his flesh met the ancient rock, the hum within him surged, no longer a subtle undertone, but a roaring crescendo. It felt as if the stone and his own being were resonating on the same frequency, a shared chord struck across the vast expanse of time. He pressed his palm against the handprint, his own skin against the weathered stone, and closed his eyes. In that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The wind, the fading light, the distant murmur of the town, all dissolved into a swirling vortex of pure sensation. He felt the stone's ancient weight, its deep connection to the earth's core, and through it, he felt her. It was a communion, a silent dialogue, spoken not in words, but in the exchange of resonant energies. The phantom touch he had experienced in his dreams was no longer a ghostly echo, but a palpable reality, a confirmation of a connection that transcended the physical. The handprint was not merely an image, It was a gateway, a tangible manifestation of the dream woman's tangible influence, a testament to her ability to leave an imprint not just on his subconscious, but on the very fabric of the physical world. He saw glimpses then, fleeting impressions that flickered at the edge of his perception, images of ancient rituals performed under starlit skies, figures cloaked in shadows, moving with a fluid grace, hands pressed against similar stones, imbuing them with unseen power. He saw the stone itself, newly shaped and placed, a vibrant energy coursing through it as a hand, eerily like the one etched upon it, was pressed against its surface. It was a vision of a time when the boundaries between the spiritual and the material were porous, when the world hummed with a power that was both revered and understood. The dream woman's essence seemed to flow through him, a current of ancient memory, a whisper of a shared past. The handprint was more than a physical mark. It was a symbol, a cipher that hinted at a history that was not his alone, but collective. It spoke of a shared heritage, a lineage of souls bound by an ancient pact, a collective memory waiting to be unearthed. He felt a profound sense of recognition, as if he had stood here before, in this very place, his own hand pressed against this very stone. The feeling was overwhelming, a potent blend of awe and a disquieting sense of déjà vu. He withdrew his hand, the hum slowly subsiding to its familiar deep thrum. The stone remained silent and impassive, the handprint an indelible testament to a connection that defied rational explanation. Elias looked at his own hand, then back at the stone. The phantom touch he had felt, the subtle resonance that had guided him here, it was all coalescing, weaving together a narrative that his scientific mind struggled to process, yet his soul recognized with startling clarity. The dream woman was not merely a figment of his sleeping mind, nor was her influence confined to the ethereal realm of dreams. She was a force, a tangible presence that could interact with the physical world, leaving her mark upon it and upon him. The handprint on the stone was proof. It was a physical anchor, a bridge between the unseen world she inhabited and the tangible reality he called his own. This encounter solidified his growing understanding that the universe was far more intricate, far more interconnected than his previous worldview had allowed. He spent a long time by the stone, lost in contemplation. The hum continued, a silent affirmation of the truth he was beginning to accept. It was the sound of the earth's deep memory, the echo of ancient rituals, the silent song of a forgotten lineage. The handprint was a punctuation mark in this grand symphony, a moment of intense focus that drew all the disparate threads together. He understood, with a clarity that bordered on revelation, that he was not just an observer of this mystery, but a participant. The dream woman had drawn him into her world, and in doing so, she had awakened something profound within him. As the first stars began to prick the velvet canvas of the night sky, Elias turned away from the monolith. He carried the imprint of the stone and the resonance of the hum within him. The journey had begun not with a destination, but with a single ancient handprint, a silent testament to a connection that transcended time and form, a tangible clue left by a being of ephemeral substance. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him and yet invigorated him, that this was only the beginning. The labyrinth of lost rivers was unfolding before him, and the path was marked not by water, but by the deep, resonant hum of ancient earth and the indelible touch of a dream made real. The following days were a blur of quiet introspection, punctuated by the ever present hum. Elias found himself returning to the stone at different times of the day, observing how the light played upon its surface, how the handprint seemed to change with the shifting shadows. Each visit brought a new layer of understanding, a subtle deepening of the connection he felt. He began to notice other anomalies, small details that had previously escaped his attention, a pattern of moss growth on the stone that seemed to mirror the lines on his own palm, a peculiar alignment of smaller rocks surrounding the monolith that suggested a deliberate arrangement, a celestial map etched into the very earth. He recalled fragmented images from his dreams, not of the dream woman herself, but of places and symbols that now seemed intrinsically linked to this ancient stone, a circle of standing stones half buried in mist, a spiraling pattern carved into a wooden staff, a series of concentric rings drawn in the sand. These were not mere dream images. They were clues, pieces of a puzzle that the handprint on the stone had suddenly brought into sharp focus. He felt a burgeoning intuition, a sense that the dream woman was not simply a singular entity, but a manifestation of a larger, more ancient force, a guardian of secrets woven into the very fabric of the landscape. His research, once focused on the mundane intricacies of historical texts, began to take on a new, almost mystical dimension. He found himself poring over local folklore, searching for any mention of the monolith or similar ancient sites. He unearthed tales of earth spirits, of ley lines that crisscross the region, of rituals performed in forgotten groves. While much of it was steeped in superstition and allegory, Elias began to discern a recurring theme, the presence of a deep, pervasive energy that resonated with the earth, an energy that could be channeled and communicated with. He discovered a particularly intriguing passage in a tattered journal belonging to a local antiquarian from the early 20th century. The author described the monolith as a place of unusual resonance, a site where the veil between worlds thins and the earth whispers its secrets to those who know how to listen. The journal also mentioned a specific time of year, a confluence of celestial events, when the stone was said to be most potent, most alive with this ancient energy. Elias's heart quickened. He cross-referenced the dates mentioned with astronomical charts, realizing that this potent period was rapidly approaching. The hum within him seemed to respond to this newfound knowledge, intensifying whenever he contemplated the approaching celestial alignment. It was as if the very universe was corroborating his burgeoning understanding, the dream woman's silent symphony reaching a crescendo. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, a dawning awareness that his connection to her and to this ancient stone was not a passive observation, but an active engagement. He was being called to participate in something far grander than he could have imagined. He returned to the stone one evening, under a sky heavy with the promise of rain. The air was charged, alive with an expectant stillness. As he placed his hand on the imprint, the hum surged with an intensity he had not experienced before. It was a physical force now, a palpable vibration that seemed to emanate from his very core, resonating with the stone, with the earth, with the unseen energies that permeated the night. He felt a shift, a subtle but profound alteration in his perception. The world around him seemed to sharpen, its colors deepening, its textures becoming more vivid. He could feel the minute vibrations of the earth beneath his feet, the slow, steady pulse of the planet's own life force. And within this symphony of subtle energies, he felt her presence, not as a distant whisper, but as a vibrant, all-encompassing resonance. Images flashed through his mind with startling clarity, not fragmented glimpses this time, but coherent narratives. He saw the handprint being made, not by the dream woman as he knew her, but by a woman who bore her likeness, her ancient eyes, her ethereal grace. This woman was not alone. She stood with others, their hands pressed against similar stones scattered across the landscape, their voices raised in a chant that resonated with the earth's own song. They were guardians, custodians of an ancient wisdom, their lives dedicated to maintaining the balance of forces that Elias was only just beginning to comprehend. The handprint was not a personal mark left by the dream woman for his singular enlightenment, but a sign of belonging, a symbol of an ancient lineage of earth keepers. It was a declaration of stewardship, a tangible sign that this place and the energies it contained were under a sacred charge. The dream woman was not an anomaly, but a continuation of a long and unbroken tradition. The phantom touch he had felt was a subtle invitation, an acknowledgement of his nascent potential to become part of that lineage. The weight of this realization settled upon him, heavy and profound. He was not merely an academic seeking answers, but a potential inheritor of a legacy. The hum was not just her voice, but the collective voice of generations, a chorus of keepers echoing through time. He felt a surge of something akin to awe, mixed with a deep sense of responsibility. This was not a game of abstract contemplation. It was a living, breathing legacy, and he was being drawn into its currents. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Elias withdrew his hand from the stone. The hum remained, a constant thrumming beneath the surface of his awareness, a promise of further revelations. He looked at the handprint, no longer just a curious marking, but a profound symbol of connection, of continuity, of a shared heritage that stretched back into the mists of time. The labyrinth of lost rivers was revealing its ancient patterns, and Elias Thorne, guided by the resonant whisper of the dream woman, was finally beginning to find his way. The earth itself was his guide, and its deep, vibrant hum was the song that would lead him forward into the heart of the mystery. He knew with an unshakable certainty that his life had irrevocably changed and that the path ahead, though shrouded in enigma, was one he was compelled to follow. The handprint on the stone was not an end, but a beginning, an invitation to step fully into a world where the tangible and the ethereal danced in a perpetual, resonant embrace. The stone, cool and unyielding beneath Elias's palm, seemed to resonate with a silent symphony of lost time. As his fingers traced the familiar curves of the handprint, a cascade of names, long absent from maps and memory, began to surface in his mind. They were not words he had learned, nor names he had encountered in his extensive research. They simply were, blooming in his consciousness like spectral flowers. The serpent's coil, a name that conjured images of a sinuous, winding river that once carved its path through verdant valleys, now reduced to a network of parched ravines. The whispering vein, a waterway whispered to have fed ancient settlements, its memory now a dry, cracked whisper in the collective unconscious, and the sunken mirror, a river so wide and placid it was said to have held the sky within its depths, now a desolate expanse of salt-crusted earth. These were not just geographical features, they were arteries of a vibrant, forgotten past, conduits through which the lifeblood of civilizations had flowed. Elias felt a profound, almost visceral connection to these vanished waterways. It was more than an academic curiosity. It was a deep, resonating ache, a lament for the life they had once sustained, for the stories they had carried, for the very essence of existence they had nourished. He imagined the bustling markets that must have lined their banks, the laughter of children playing in their waters, the solemn ceremonies performed under the gaze of a sky reflected in their shimmering surfaces. Now, only silence and dust remained. The hum within him seemed to pulse in time with these ghostly river names, each utterance a ripple of energy that expanded outwards, touching upon the phantom currents of these lost waterways. It was as if the dream woman, through her indelible mark upon the stone, was not only revealing a personal connection, but also unlocking a deeper geological memory of the land itself. She was the keeper of these lost narratives, the archivist of a drowned history, her presence a luminous thread connecting him to a tapestry of forgotten lives. The handprint was not just an imprint of her touch, but an imprint of her knowledge, a conduit to the earth's own ancient chronicles. He began to see the land not as it was, but as it had been, a vibrant network of flowing water, a life-giving embrace that had cradled human endeavor for millennia. The dry riverbeds he had seen on his walks, dismissed as mere geological curiosities, now pulsed with the phantom flow of their former glory. The hum was his guide, translating the silent language of the earth, revealing the ghost of water where only dust and stone now lay. It was a sobering realization, a stark reminder of the ephemeral nature of even the most enduring civilizations and the relentless power of time to reshape the very face of the world. The dream woman, he now understood, was more than a fleeting visitor to his subconscious. She was a nexus, a point of convergence for these ancient currents of memory. Her touch on the stone was a key, unlocking not just a personal connection, but a collective inheritance. He felt a surge of responsibility, a dawning awareness that his pursuit of understanding was intertwining with a much larger, more significant purpose. The land itself seemed to breathe around him, a vast, silent entity filled with stories waiting to be retold. He spent hours by the monolith, his senses attuned to the subtle vibrations that emanated from it. The phantom river names continued to surface, each one bringing with it a flurry of associated imagery. The scent of blossoms that once lined a forgotten riverbank, the sound of a communal song carried on the breeze from a city now buried beneath centuries of soil, the feel of cool water on skin in a land that now knew only drought. These were not passive visions, they were invitations, glimpses into a past so rich and vibrant that its absence was a palpable wound. One particular river, the Weaver's Stream, kept returning to his mind. The name evoked an image of a gentle, meandering river, its waters so clear they seemed to weave threads of sunlight as they flowed. He saw, in his mind's eye, women with skilled hands sitting by its banks, their fingers dancing with the threads of flax and wool, their lives intimately connected to the rhythm of the water. It was a vision of simple, harmonious existence, a testament to how deeply intertwined human lives had been with the natural world. The disappearance of such a river was not just an ecological loss, it was a severing of cultural roots, a silencing of a way of life. He began to meticulously chart these phantom rivers, sketching their imagined courses based on the impressions he received. His study became less about academic research and more about a form of intuitive archaeology, guided by the resonant hum and the spectral whispers of the dream woman. He discovered that these vanished waterways were not isolated incidents, but formed an intricate, interconnected network, a vascular system that had once nourished a vast and complex civilization. The dream woman's handprint was the nexus of this forgotten map, the starting point from which all other forgotten rivers flowed. The more he delved into this unseen geography, the more he felt the dream woman's presence solidify. She was not just a harbinger of these lost rivers, but their guardian, their memory keeper. Her touch on the stone was a testament to her deep connection to these ancient flows, her ability to access and transmit their essence. He realized that her existence and her influence was inextricably linked to the very vitality of the land, to the ebb and flow of its hidden lifeblood. He started to notice patterns in the way the phantom rivers flowed, recognizing that their courses often followed subtle contours in the present landscape, invisible to the casual observer, but clearly discernible to his newly awakened senses. A slight depression in the earth, a particular arrangement of ancient trees, a gathering of unique geological formations. These were the lingering traces, the skeletal remains of a once thriving hydrological system. The dream woman's guidance was the key to deciphering these silent clues, to reconstructing the vibrant past from its fragmented remnants. The weight of this knowledge was immense. It was a responsibility to honor these lost rivers, to bring their stories back from oblivion, to acknowledge the civilizations that had flourished and faded along their banks. He felt a growing sense of urgency, as if time were a tangible force, and the memory of these waterways was slowly, inexorably, slipping away with each passing moment. The hum was not just a guide, it was a constant reminder of the impermanence of all things and the importance of preserving what had been lost. He wondered about the reasons for their disappearance. Was it a gradual climate shift, a sudden cataclysm, or perhaps something more deliberate, a conscious decision to divert or harness these waters for purposes unknown? The dream woman offered no direct answers, only the resonance of her presence, the silent echoes of what once was. Her knowledge was not imparted through words, but through a deep, immersive understanding, a sympathetic vibration that allowed him to perceive the world through her ancient lens. The handprint on the stone became a focal point, a tangible anchor in this sea of forgotten currents. It was a constant reminder of the source of this revelation, of the one who had chosen to share this profound and melancholic history with him. He felt a growing desire to understand her, to grasp the nature of her existence and her connection to these vanished waterways. Was she a spirit of the land, a residual consciousness of those who had lived and died by these rivers, or something entirely different, a being that existed beyond the conventional understanding of life and death? The hum continued, a low, steady thrum that seemed to permeate the very air he breathed. It was the song of the lost rivers, a lament and a celebration, a testament to the enduring power of memory and the profound interconnectedness of all things. Elias Thorne, standing by the ancient monolith, felt himself irrevocably drawn into this unseen world, a cartographer of the lost, a listener to the earth's deepest secrets, guided by the indelible touch of a dream made real. The labyrinth of lost rivers was unfolding before him, and each phantom current, each spectral name, was a step deeper into a mystery that was slowly, beautifully revealing itself. The land held its breath, waiting for its forgotten stories to be told, and Elias was the conduit, the vessel through which the memory of water would flow once more, not in physical form, but in the resonant echo of a past that refused to be extinguished. He felt a profound kinship with these spectral waterways, a sense of belonging to a history that transcended his own brief existence, a history that was etched not just in stone, but in the very soul of the earth. The dream woman's touch was a legacy, and he was slowly, irrevocably beginning to claim it. Elias continued to ponder the nature of the dream woman, her presence an ethereal anchor in the ever-expanding labyrinth of lost rivers. She was a silent sentinel, a watcher who seemed to observe the ebb and flow of human existence with an ancient, unblinking gaze. Her essence, he felt, predated the very concept of timelines, a consciousness woven from an era before the scratching of the first stylus upon clay, before the first fire was coaxed from flint, he sensed in her a fragment of awareness that had witnessed the world's genesis, an entity that had experienced the slow tectonic ballet of continents and the nascent stirrings of life in primal oceans. Her existence was not bound by the linear progression that governed mortal lives. She was a timeless being, a witness who perceived the unfolding tapestry of the world from a perspective utterly alien to human comprehension. He saw her not as a static figure, but as a shifting mosaic of light and shadow, formless yet profoundly present. Sometimes she was a whisper of wind rustling through phantom reeds, other times a glint of sunlight on water that no longer flowed. Her forms were ephemeral, transient, like reflections on a disturbed surface, yet each fleeting manifestation carried the weight of epochs. It was as if she could inhabit the very memory of the land, becoming the rustle of leaves on trees long turned to dust, or the murmur of a forgotten language carried on a breeze that had long since died. This fluidity, this lack of fixed form, spoke to an existence unbound by the physical constraints that defined Elias and his world. She was an observer, not in time, but of time, a cosmic consciousness that perceived the grand sweep of history as a single, indivisible moment. His understanding of her shifted with each newly revealed river, each spectral name that bloomed in his mind. She was not merely a guide, but a manifestation of the land's own deep memory, a living embodiment of the history that had been eroded by time and neglect. Her connection to the lost rivers was not simply one of knowledge, but of intrinsic being. She was the rivers, or rather, their lingering essence, their spectral echo. When he felt the hum, it was as if he was also tapping into her consciousness, a shared awareness that spanned millennia. He imagined her standing on the banks of the serpent's coil in its full, sinuous glory, feeling the cool waters glide past her unbodied feet, or perhaps floating upon the placid surface of the sunken mirror, her form blending with the reflected heavens. This perception of her as a timeless, shifting entity was both exhilarating and daunting. It meant that her experiences were not sequential, but simultaneous. She could, in the same instant, witness the construction of a long vanished city and its eventual crumbling into dust. She could hear the joyous shouts of a festival on the banks of the Weaver's stream, and the mournful silence that later descended upon its dry bed. This was a mode of perception that Elias struggled to fully grasp, his own mind so firmly rooted in the causality of cause and effect, of beginning and end. Yet, the dream woman's existence challenged these fundamental tenets, offering a glimpse into a reality where past, present, and future were interwoven, a grand, eternal now. He began to conceptualize her not as a person in the human sense, but as a consciousness that had achieved a unique form of immortality, not through earthly longevity, but through a transcendence of the earthly condition itself. Perhaps she was a collective memory, an amalgamation of all the lives lived and lost along the arteries of these forgotten waterways. Or perhaps she was something far older, a spirit of the earth that had witnessed the slow unfolding of geological time, its consciousness adapting and evolving with the land itself. The more he tried to pin down her nature, the more she eluded him, her essence like mist, always just beyond his grasp, yet undeniably real. The dream woman's silence was not an absence of communication, but a different form of it. Her insights were conveyed through the resonance of the stone, through the phantom rivers that bloomed in his mind, and through the subtle shifts in his own perception of the world. It was a language of intuition, of shared resonance, a communion that bypassed the limitations of spoken or written word. He felt her presence most strongly when he was alone with the monolith, when the mundane distractions of the world faded away, leaving him open to the deeper currents of memory that she seemed to embody. He started to see echoes of her shifting nature in the natural world around him, the way a river carved a new course after a flood, seemingly erasing its past while simultaneously creating a new future. The way a seed contained the dormant promise of a forest, its future form already encoded within its tiny shell. The way ancient ruins seemed to hold the spectral imprint of the lives that had once pulsed within their walls, a lingering energy that whispered of forgotten rituals and lost voices. These were not just observations, they were a mirror to the dream woman's own eternal flux, a confirmation of her existence as a being unbound by the constricting definitions of mortality. He mused on the immense burden of her eternal observation, to witness the rise and fall of countless civilizations, to see the slow march of progress and the inevitable decay, all without the relief of forgetting or the solace of an end. Was there a loneliness in such an existence? A profound isolation born from an inability to truly connect with the ephemeral lives she observed? Or was there a deep peace, a profound understanding that transcended the emotional turmoil of mortal experience? He suspected the latter, a state of being that was beyond joy or sorrow as he understood them, a serene detachment born from an infinite perspective. The dream woman was the ultimate historian, not of recorded events, but of lived experience, of the subtle currents of existence that shaped and were shaped by the flow of water. She was the living archive of the land, her memory a vast subterranean library, accessible only to those who could attune themselves to its frequencies. Elias felt increasingly like an apprentice in her silent academy, learning not from lectures or texts, but from a direct, almost cellular absorption of ancient knowledge. His own life, once a matter of personal ambition and intellectual pursuit, was beginning to feel like a small tributary flowing into the immense, timeless river of her awareness. He realized that his pursuit of the lost rivers was not just about uncovering geographical facts. It was about understanding a fundamental truth of existence, the constant, cyclical dance of creation and dissolution. The dream woman, in her ageless observation, was the embodiment of this truth. She was the echo of what had been, the silent witness to what was, and perhaps the subtle architect of what would be. Her presence was a constant, gentle reminder that even in the face of oblivion, the essence of life, of memory, persisted, flowing through unseen channels, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The monolith, with its enduring imprint, was not just a relic of the past, but a beacon, a point of connection to this timeless consciousness, a gateway into the labyrinth of lost rivers, guided by the silent, observing spirit of ages. He knew with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones that his journey was no longer solely his own, but a shared exploration into the heart of forgotten time, a quest to understand not just the land, but the eternal observer who held its deepest secrets. The weight of this revelation settled upon him, not as a burden, but as a profound and humbling privilege. He was being allowed to see through eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of worlds, and in doing so, he was beginning to perceive his own existence in a new, infinitely vaster context. The silence of the monolith, a constant companion in Elias's solitary vigil, was abruptly punctuated by a subtle shift in the air, a whisper of preternatural awareness that prickled his skin. It was a sensation he had come to associate with the dream woman's presence, a subtle dilation of perception that suggested her gaze was upon him, even in his waking hours. He turned from the weathered stone, his mind still swimming in the ethereal currents of his recent communion, when his eyes alighted upon his makeshift sleeping pallet. There, resting with an almost deliberate stillness upon the rough weave of his pillow, lay a single feather. It was a crow's feather, impossibly glossy, its obsidian surface catching the dim light filtering through the ancient stones. The barbs were tightly packed, each one a testament to the bird's meticulous grooming, and the central shaft, dark and unyielding, seemed to possess a strength far beyond its delicate appearance. It was not merely discarded, it was placed. The implication was undeniable. A tangible artifact dropped from the ineffable realm she inhabited into the stark reality of his. The dream woman, the timeless watcher of the lost rivers, had sent a messenger. Crows. The word itself resonated with a primal energy within him. He had always held a certain reverence for these intelligent, enigmatic creatures, their raucous calls a soundtrack to the wilder corners of his world. They were birds of ill omen to some, harbingers of doom and decay, their black plumage a shroud against the sun. Yet, for others, they were symbols of transformation, of secrets unveiled, of a wisdom that transcended mortal understanding. They were the weavers of mystery, the keepers of liminal spaces, the bridges between the seen and the unseen. And here, in this desolate place, one of their kind had left a gift, a cryptic token of her continued involvement. He reached out, his fingers tracing the smooth, cool surface of the feather. It felt impossibly real, yet imbued with an otherworldly aura. This was no ordinary feather. shed by a passing bird. It was an intentional offering, a deliberate communication. The dream woman, in her silent, immeasurable existence, was reaching across the veil, not with words or visions, but with this stark, tangible symbol. It was an invitation, a gentle yet insistent urging to embrace the unknown that lay before him, to step further into the labyrinth of lost rivers without the crutch of certainty. The feather, he understood, was more than just a mark of attention. It was a key, a primer for a language he was only just beginning to comprehend, the language of intuition, of profound symbols that bypassed the rational mind and spoke directly to the soul. The dream woman's messengers, it seemed, were as mysterious and multifaceted as she was. They were not the flamboyant heralds of epic tales, but subtle, almost secretive entities, dropping their significant fragments into his path, trusting him to decipher their meaning. He recalled the dream woman's ephemeral forms, her existence a fluid dance between the material and the immaterial. She was the whisper in the wind, the glint on the water, the very breath of the ancient earth. And the crow, with its keen senses, its ability to navigate the boundaries of dawn and dusk, its association with secrets and the underworld, seemed a fitting emissary for such a being. It was a creature that understood the shadows, that could perceive the subtle currents of energy that Elias was only now learning to sense. The feather's placement on his pillow was particularly telling. It spoke of intimacy, of a quiet moment observed, a personal offering made in the sanctuary of his rest. It was as if she had been present as he slept, a silent guardian, and in the liminal state between dreams and waking had left this token to guide his steps. It was a confirmation that his journey was not a solitary one, but a guided expedition, albeit one where the guide communicated through the rustle of feathers and the hum of ancient stones. He found himself wondering about the crow itself. Had it flown directly from some spectral roost, drawn by an invisible thread to this place? Or had it been an earthly creature, touched by the dream woman's influence, its natural instincts imbued with a deeper purpose? The ambiguity was part of the message, he suspected. The less defined the source, the more potent the symbol. The crow was a creature of transition, and its feather, a fragment of its being, mirrored that transitional nature. Elias felt a familiar surge of exhilaration mixed with a tremor of apprehension. This was the path she was urging him toward, a deeper immersion into the intuitive, the symbolic, the seemingly irrational. His rational mind, so accustomed to dissecting and analyzing, had to learn to yield, to accept the wisdom that lay beyond the reach of logic. The feather was a call to trust that yielding, to allow the subtle nudges of intuition to guide him, much as the dream woman's presence guided the lost rivers back into his awareness. He spent a long time examining the feather, turning it over and over in his fingers. It was a tangible piece of evidence, an anchor in the often shifting landscape of his experiences. It solidified the dream woman's connection to him, transforming her from an ethereal dream figure into a present guiding force. This was a powerful validation, a silent assurance that he was on the right path, that his efforts to understand the lost rivers were not in vain. The crow's presence in this context was not a harbinger of doom, but a beacon of knowledge, a guide through the obscurities. It represented the hidden facets of truth, the aspects of reality that were not readily apparent, but were nonetheless vital. The dream woman was using these symbols to teach him how to perceive the world anew, to understand that the deepest truths were often cloaked in mystery, revealed only to those willing to look beyond the obvious. He envisioned the dream woman, perhaps standing on the banks of a river long since vanished, her form coalescing with the twilight. A crow, perched on a skeletal branch overhead, would let the feather fall, a silent signal, a wordless instruction, and he, miles and centuries away, would receive it. The connection was both humbling and exhilarating, a testament to the vast, interconnected web of existence that the lost rivers represented. The feather was a tangible embodiment of the dream woman's essence, a fragment of her timeless being. It was a reminder that even in the vastness of the labyrinth, even in the face of overwhelming mystery, there was a guiding hand, a silent consciousness that watched over him. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for this silent communication, for the way she imparted her wisdom without demanding his understanding in return, trusting him to find it in his own time, in his own way. He carefully tucked the feather into a small pouch he carried, a treasured memento of this silent, profound exchange. It was a tangible promise, a confirmation that the dream woman was with him, her influence weaving through the fabric of his reality. The path ahead was still shrouded in mist, the exact nature of the lost rivers still largely unknown. But now he carried with him not just the memory of her presence, but a tangible sign, a reminder that he was not alone and that the universe, in its enigmatic way, was speaking to him through the glossy plumage of a crow. The feather was an omen, not of misfortune, but of revelation, an invitation to delve deeper into the mysteries that pulsed at the heart of the lost rivers, guided by the silent wisdom of the dream woman and her feathered messengers. The journey was unfolding, one symbolic whisper at a time, and Elias was ready to listen. The single crow feather, now nestled safely in his pouch, felt like a seed of understanding planted in the fertile ground of his intuition. It was a tangible link, a whisper from the dream woman that had amplified the nascent theories swirling within Elias. He sat by the silent monolith, the vast, echoing silence of the place, no longer a void, but a canvas upon which his thoughts could paint intricate patterns. The feather, a dark star against the pale leather of the pouch, seemed to hum with a silent energy, a subtle resonance that vibrated not just in his hand, but deep within his being. It was as if the feather itself held a forgotten melody, a fragment of a song sung by a voice long silenced. He found himself contemplating the nature of the dream woman, her ethereal presence now more than just a mysterious watcher of the lost rivers. What if she was not merely a spirit bound to this place or an aspect of the earth's memory, but something far more personal, far more poignant, a theory as fragile and yet as persistent as a spider's silk thread in the dawn light began to form within him? What if she was a dreamer, a soul whose own life, whose own narrative had been fractured, interrupted, perhaps even violently severed before its natural completion? The idea resonated with a profound, almost melancholic truth. A chord struck deep within his own solitary existence. He imagined this forgotten dreamer, her consciousness untethered from the physical realm, adrift in the liminal spaces between worlds. Perhaps her life had been a vibrant tapestry, rich with experiences, emotions, and aspirations, until some cataclysmic event had ripped it asunder, leaving only scattered threads, broken strands of memory. And now she wandered through the dreams of others, a spectral echo drawn to those who, like him, possessed a sensitivity to the deeper currents of existence. She was a ghost of a narrative, forever seeking the missing pieces, the forgotten chapters that would allow her story to find coherence once more. Elias felt an unexpected kinship with this hypothetical dreamer. He, too, had experienced the disorienting sensation of fragmented memories, the unsettling feeling of a life lived in pieces, of a past that felt both intimately familiar and frustratingly out of reach. The lost rivers, in a way, were a metaphor for this very state of being, currents of experience, once flowing and vital, now obscured, diverted, or entirely vanished. He understood, on a visceral level, the ache of incompleteness, the yearning for a lost wholeness. If the dream woman was indeed a forgotten dreamer, then her presence was not just a passive observation of his journey, but an active search. She was perhaps using the minds of those she visited, Elias included, as a vast collective dreamscape where she could sift through the detritus of consciousness, searching for any shard of memory that might belong to her. The dream woman's focus on the lost rivers, on the very concept of submerged or forgotten narratives, suddenly took on a new, intensely personal dimension. She was not just a guardian of lost stories. She was a lost story herself, desperately trying to reclaim her own forgotten voice. He considered the implications of this. If she was searching, what was she seeking? Was it a specific memory, a crucial event that would unlock the entirety of her past? Or was it a broader sense of understanding, a feeling of belonging, a reassertion of her identity in the face of utter oblivion? The crow's feather, then, was not just a message of awareness, but a subtle offering of solidarity. It was a gesture from one who understood the weight of forgotten things, a silent acknowledgement of a shared struggle. The dream woman's ephemeral forms, her fluid nature, could be interpreted as a manifestation of her fragmented self. She was not a fixed entity, but a constellation of fleeting impressions, a kaleidoscope of unfinished thoughts and emotions. Each encounter with her, each dream Elias experienced, was a brief glimpse into a different facet of her shattered existence, and he, in his persistent exploration of the lost rivers, was perhaps inadvertently helping her to reassemble these scattered fragments. He began to see his own journey as an act of empathy, a quest that extended beyond his personal fascination with the lost rivers. It was a mission to aid this forgotten dreamer, to offer her the sanctuary of his awareness, to become a conduit for her piecing together of a life that had been stolen from her. The thought filled him with a sense of purpose, a gentle yet profound responsibility. He was not merely an observer of mysteries, he was becoming an active participant in the restoration of a lost soul. This new perspective added a layer of urgency to his quest. He felt a growing desire to understand the nature of her interruption, to uncover the circumstances that had led to her fragmented existence. Was it a betrayal, a natural disaster, a spiritual transgression? The questions, like the lost rivers themselves, meandered through his mind, each one leading to a deeper layer of inquiry. The dream woman was no longer just a figure of fascination. She was a soul in need, and Elias felt an undeniable pull to offer his assistance. He thought about the nature of dreams themselves, those fleeting, often illogical narratives that unfolded in the darkness of sleep. They were the natural habitat of the subconscious, the place where repressed memories, unacknowledged emotions, and nascent ideas often found expression. For a dreamer whose waking life had been cut short, the dreamscape would be the only realm where she could continue her existence, the only place where she could seek solace and understanding. Elias pondered the possibility that he was not the only one she visited. If she was indeed searching for fragments of her story, she would likely cast her ethereal net wide, touching the minds of many. Perhaps others had experienced her presence, felt her silent yearning, and dismissed it as mere fancy, as the common illusions of the sleeping mind. But Elias, with his growing sensitivity and his deliberate immersion in the symbolic language of the lost rivers, was perhaps uniquely positioned to recognize her for what she might be. He began to pay closer attention to the subtle nuances of his dreams, to the fleeting images, the resonant emotions, the recurring motifs that might, in retrospect, be connected to the dream woman's fractured narrative. Were there recurring symbols that he had previously overlooked? Were there particular emotions that felt out of place, alien to his own inner landscape, yet undeniably present in the dream state? The crow's feather served as a constant reminder to be vigilant, to look for the subtle clues that the dream woman might be leaving behind. The lost rivers, he mused, could also be interpreted as metaphors for her lost memories. Each river, once a vital artery of her life, now a submerged current of experience waiting to be unearthed. His quest to map these lost rivers was, in essence, a quest to help her map her own lost life. The interconnectedness of it all was becoming increasingly apparent. a vast, intricate web of forgotten histories and emergent awareness. He wondered if his own experiences had somehow drawn her to him, if his own internal landscapes of loss and seeking had created a sympathetic resonance, a beacon that drew her fragmented consciousness towards him. Perhaps the very act of seeking to understand the lost rivers had awakened something within the dream woman, stirring her from a deeper slumber, reigniting her dormant desire to reclaim her story. The dream woman's interaction with him was, therefore, a two-way street. While she was the one reaching across the veil, Elias was also, in his own way, reaching back. He was offering her a grounding presence, a conscious observer who was actively trying to make sense of the fragmented whispers she conveyed. He was becoming a safe harbor for her scattered memories, a place where they could begin to coalesce, to find a semblance of order. He imagined her as a celestial cartographer, meticulously charting the lost waterways of existence, not for any geographical purpose, but to find the tributaries of her own forgotten life. And he, Elias, was her apprentice, her co-conspirator, learning to read the celestial maps of dreams and intuition. The crow's feather was his diploma, a symbol of his willingness to undertake this extraordinary apprenticeship. The thought of her interrupted life brought a pang of sorrow, a profound empathy for the unlived experiences, the unspoken words, the unfulfilled potential that was lost with her. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of existence, of how easily a life could be unwritten, erased from the grand narrative. But within that sorrow, there was also a flicker of hope, the nascent promise that even in the face of such profound loss, remembrance and reclamation were still possible. Elias resolved to delve deeper into this compelling theory. He would approach his dreams with renewed intention, not just as explorations of the lost rivers, but as dialogues with this forgotten dreamer. He would seek to understand her not as an enigma, but as a soul whose story deserved to be told, whose existence deserved to be acknowledged. The crow's feather, tucked safely away, was a constant reminder of this commitment, a tangible promise to listen, to observe, and to help in whatever way he could to bring her lost narrative back into the light. The labyrinth of lost rivers was not just a landscape of geographical mystery, but a profound metaphor for the depths of forgotten consciousness, and Elias was ready to navigate its most sacred and sorrowful currents. He would become the echo of her lost dream, the quiet voice that helped her to remember. The encounter left Elias not with a sense of exhaustion, but with an unusual, pervasive tranquility. It was as if the dream woman had inadvertently gifted him a measure of her own ethereal essence, a calm that seeped into the very marrow of his bones. The frenetic chatter of his everyday thoughts, the persistent hum of worries about the mundane, these had receded, not abruptly, but with the gentle ebb of a tide. The silence that now permeated his inner world was not an absence of noise, but a profound, resonant stillness, a deep well of peace that seemed to anchor him against the swirling currents of external chaos. This was not the quiet of emptiness, but the vibrant hush of a deeply held secret, a knowing that transcended words. He found himself breathing more deeply, each inhalation drawing in a sense of spaciousness, each exhalation releasing the lingering tendrils of everyday unease. The world, which moments before had seemed a cacophony of demands and distractions, now appeared bathed in a soft, luminous clarity. It was as if a fine dust had been settled from his vision, revealing the intricate, often overlooked patterns that wove through the fabric of reality. This newfound stillness acted as a powerful amplifier for his senses, particularly his intuition. The subtle whispers of the dream woman, which before had seemed like faint echoes at the edge of his awareness, now resonated with a startling clarity. He began to notice patterns he had previously missed, connections that had lain dormant, waiting for the right conditions to reveal themselves. The dream woman's symbolic language, her use of fragmented images and resonant emotions, no longer felt like an obscure code, but like a direct transmission, a stream of understanding that flowed effortlessly into his mind. The crow's feather, still warm against his skin, seemed to pulse with a subtle energy, a tangible anchor to this altered state of perception. It was as if his entire being had been recalibrated, tuned to a finer frequency, one that allowed him to perceive the subtler vibrations of existence. This was not merely a mental shift, it was a somatic experience, a deep settling of his nervous system, a quieting of the internal static that had always made true receptivity so elusive. He realized that this stillness was not a passive state, but an active engagement with the present moment. It was the ability to hold space for the unknown, to remain open and receptive without the usual frantic need to categorize or control. In this quietude, the anxiety that had often accompanied his pursuits, the fear of not understanding, of missing a crucial detail, dissolved. He was no longer chasing answers with a desperate urgency, but allowing them to emerge organically, like seeds unfolding in fertile soil. The dream woman, it seemed, had shown him not just a path towards understanding her fragmented narrative, but a path towards a more profound understanding of himself. Her presence, in its enigmatic way, had become a catalyst for his own inner awakening, a guide leading him not to external revelations, but to the quiet power residing within. The stillness also manifested in his interactions with the world around him. He found himself less prone to immediate judgment, more inclined to observe and absorb the rustle of leaves, the play of light and shadow, the murmur of distant sounds. All these elements of the external environment seemed to possess a new depth, a richer texture. He felt a sense of interconnectedness, a feeling that he was not separate from the world, but an integral part of its unfolding tapestry. This expanded awareness allowed him to perceive the subtle energies that pulsed beneath the surface of everyday life, the unspoken emotions, the hidden currents that influenced human interactions. The dream woman's influence, he surmised, was not confined to the realm of dreams or the exploration of lost rivers. It was a pervasive force, gently reshaping his perception of reality itself. He began to see this stillness as a sanctuary, a private refuge he could carry with him, independent of his external circumstances. It was a space where he could retreat from the clamor of the world, where his own inner wisdom could speak without interruption. This sanctuary was not built of stone or wood, but of a cultivated inner quiet, a conscious choice to disengage from the noise and to attune himself to the subtle rhythms of his own being. He found himself returning to this inner stillness throughout his day, a brief pause to recenter, to reconfirm his connection to this deeper, calmer self. It was a practice, he realized, not a destination, a continuous unfolding of awareness that required gentle attention and persistent cultivation. The dream woman's presence had, in essence, provided him with a key, a way to unlock this inner quietude. It was as if she had shown him the blueprint, the architecture of a serene inner landscape, and his own burgeoning receptivity had allowed him to begin constructing it. The lost rivers, once symbols of external mystery, were now also metaphors for the submerged currents of his own consciousness, the vast, unexplored territories within. And the stillness was the calm surface of these inner waters, allowing him to see the depths with greater clarity. He understood that this stillness was not about suppressing thoughts or emotions, but about observing them without attachment, allowing them to pass through him like clouds across the sky, without disturbing the vast, serene expanse of his inner being. He began to experiment with this stillness, to test its resilience against the onslaught of daily life. When faced with a difficult decision, instead of succumbing to the usual rush of indecision and anxiety, he would consciously cultivate this inner quiet, seeking the clarity that emerged from a calm mind. He found that the answers, when they came, were often not intellectual conclusions, but intuitive insights, a gentle nudge in the right direction. This was the power of the stillness, he realized. It created the fertile ground for inner wisdom to blossom, for his own innate knowing to surface. The dream woman, in her silent way, was teaching him the art of inner discernment, the ability to distinguish between the clamor of the ego and the quiet wisdom of the soul. He reflected on the nature of true peace. It was not the absence of challenge, but the presence of an unshakable calm in the face of it. It was not about achieving a state of constant bliss, but about cultivating an inner resilience that allowed him to navigate the inevitable ebb and flow of life with grace. The dream woman, with her own existence seemingly marked by disruption and fragmentation, paradoxically offered him a profound lesson in enduring peace. Her own journey, however tragic, had led her to a place where she could project this quality of stillness, this deep, resonant calm onto him. It was a testament to the enduring power of the spirit, its capacity to find peace even amidst profound loss. The crow's feather, once a mere curiosity, had become a symbol of this transformative stillness. It represented the quiet observation, the patient listening, the inner receptivity that was opening up new dimensions of understanding. It was a reminder that true strength often lay not in outward action, but in the capacity to simply be, to hold space for the unfolding of life's mysteries. He felt a sense of gratitude, not just for the potential connection to the dream woman's lost story, but for the profound personal growth that her presence was facilitating. The lost rivers were leading him to a deeper understanding of himself, and the dream woman was his silent, ethereal guide. This stillness also imbued him with a newfound sense of presence. He was no longer distracted by the past or worried about the future. He was fully, vibrantly alive in the here and now. This heightened presence allowed him to engage more authentically with others, to offer them his undivided attention, to connect with them on a deeper, more meaningful level. He realized that the stillness was not a withdrawal from the world, but a more profound engagement with it, a way of being fully present in every moment. It was in this state of grounded, peaceful awareness that the subtlest of insights, the most profound of connections, could flourish. The dream woman's quiet influence was not diminishing his engagement with the world, but amplifying it, infusing it with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning. He was learning to weave stillness into the very fabric of his days, transforming the ordinary into something extraordinary. He continued to explore the nature of this stillness, delving deeper into its nuances. He recognized that it was not a static state, but a dynamic interplay between awareness and surrender. It was the ability to observe his thoughts and emotions without being swept away by them, to acknowledge their presence without allowing them to define him. This practice of mindful observation, fostered by the dream woman's influence, allowed him to detach from the turbulence of his inner world, to find a stable anchor amidst the storm. The lost rivers, in this context, became the flowing currents of consciousness, and the stillness was the calm, observant eye that watched them pass, understanding their ephemeral nature. The dream woman, he mused, was a master weaver of this stillness. Her very being seemed to radiate it, a silent testament to a life lived with a profound inner peace, perhaps discovered only in its posthumous, fragmented existence. She had found a way to exist, to continue her narrative in a space of profound quietude, and in her silent transmission of this quality to Elias, she was not merely imparting a skill, but a fundamental shift in his being. It was a gift, a profound, immeasurable gift that promised to reorient his entire existence, allowing him to perceive the lost rivers and indeed his own life with a clarity and calm he had never before experienced. The crow's feather, a dark jewel against his skin, felt like a confirmation, a silent pact sealed in the hallowed quiet of his awakened consciousness. Elias found himself adrift in a new dimension of communication, one where the air itself seemed to hum with meaning, and where silence spoke louder than any uttered word. The dream woman, as he now understood, operated on a plane entirely removed from the conventional discourse of humanity. Her interactions with him were not a dialogue in the traditional sense, but a series of transmissions, each imbued with a layered significance that bypassed his rational mind and resonated directly with his burgeoning intuition. This was the unspoken language, a profound communion of presence and symbolism. He realized that the very absence of her voice was not a void, but a deliberate space, an invitation for him to step beyond the familiar framework of spoken language. The cacophony of human chatter, with its inherent ambiguities and potential for misunderstanding, had been replaced by a pure, unadulterated stream of perception. His task was no longer to parse sentences or decipher intent through vocal inflection, but to feel the resonance of her being, to interpret the subtle cues that painted a far richer, more complex tapestry of understanding. This forced a profound shift in his being, compelling him to engage faculties that had long lain dormant, overshadowed by the dominance of verbal intellect. He was being asked to become a conduit, to translate not words, but essences. The dream woman's communication was an art form of exquisite subtlety. A fleeting glance, held for a fraction of a second longer than ordinary, could convey a universe of emotion, a sorrow that stretched back through centuries, a knowing that encompassed epochs, or a gentle plea for understanding. Elias learned to hold his own gaze steady, to absorb the silent narratives that flickered within her eyes. These were not merely reflections of light, they were portals, windows into a consciousness that perceived reality in a way he was only beginning to grasp. He observed the subtle shift in the set of her shoulders, a posture that could speak of weariness or of an unyielding inner strength. The gentle inclination of her head might signal agreement, or perhaps a quiet invitation to explore a particular thought or feeling further. Each minute adjustment of her form, each nuanced expression that graced her ethereal features, was a brush stroke on the canvas of their shared experience. He began to understand that the most potent symbols were not grand pronouncements, but the intimate, often overlooked artifacts she left in her wake. The crow's feather, resting in his palm, was no longer just an object. It was a tangible testament to her presence, a fragment of her own journey, carrying the echoes of her flight and the secrets of her wisdom. He held it, tracing the intricate barbules with his fingertips, feeling not just the texture of keratin, but the palpable weight of its meaning. Was it a symbol of transformation, of messenger, or perhaps of a darker, more ancient truth? The answer was not delivered in a definitive statement, but unfolded within him as he remained present with the object, allowing its inherent energy to speak. Similarly, the carved symbols he found etched onto smooth river stones, or imprinted onto delicate leaves, were not mere decorations. They were glyphs of a forgotten tongue, a language of form and intention. He would spend hours, days even, contemplating a single carving. A spiral might represent the cyclical nature of existence, or a journey inward, a series of parallel lines could denote a river, or perhaps the flow of time, or even the interconnectedness of souls. The act of deciphering these symbols was not an intellectual exercise in memorization, but a deep, immersive communion. He would hold them, feel their weight, their texture, and allow his mind to quiet, waiting for the resonance, the intuitive leap that would unlock their significance. It was a process of becoming attuned to the subtle vibrations that emanated from these objects, like learning to hear a whispered secret in a crowded room. This reliance on nonverbal communication had a profound effect on Elias's own perception of consciousness. He began to realize how much of his own inner world, and indeed the inner worlds of others, operated beyond the confines of spoken words. The subtle shifts in a friend's mood, the unspoken understanding between lovers, the intuitive flash that guided a scientist's discovery. These were all manifestations of a consciousness that communicated through feeling, through intuition, through the raw, unadulterated language of being. The dream woman was not merely teaching him about her own lost narrative. She was revealing to him the very architecture of consciousness itself, demonstrating that true understanding often transcended the limitations of linguistic expression. He started to notice the unspoken language in his everyday life, seeing it reflected in the subtle cues of human interaction, in the silent dialogues of nature, the way a dog's tail wagged with unbridled joy, the stoic silence of a mountain range, the urgent whisper of the wind through the trees. These were all forms of communication that spoke directly to the soul. The dream woman's influence had, in essence, recalibrated his sensory apparatus, opening him up to a broader spectrum of meaning. He was no longer confined to the narrow bandwidth of spoken words, but could now perceive the vast, intricate symphony of silent communication that permeated the universe. The dream woman's presence was a constant reminder that the most profound truths were often found not in explanations, but in experiences. Her silence was not an emptiness to be filled, but a presence to be inhabited. It was in this fertile ground of quiet receptivity that the seeds of understanding could truly take root and flourish. He learned to trust the intuitive flashes, the gut feelings, the gut knowing that arose from moments of deep stillness. These were not mere figments of his imagination, but direct transmissions from a deeper, more ancient wisdom, a wisdom that the dream woman herself embodied. He began to see their encounters not as lessons to be learned, but as invitations to participate in a form of communion that was as old as existence itself. It was a dialogue of souls played out in the theater of the unspoken. The dream woman, with her ethereal grace and her profound stillness, was a master practitioner of this art, and Elias, through his openness and his willingness to surrender to the mystery, was becoming an increasingly adept student. The crow's feather, a constant companion, felt like a badge of honor, a symbol of his initiation into this deeper, more resonant way of being, a way that promised to unlock the secrets not only of the lost rivers, but of the very essence of life itself. The depth of this unspoken language meant that Elias had to cultivate a new kind of patience. Rushing the process, demanding immediate answers, would be akin to trying to force a bud to bloom before its times. He had to sit with the symbols to allow them to unfurl at their own pace. Guided by an inner rhythm he was only just beginning to understand. This meant embracing uncertainty, accepting that not every encounter would yield a clear, definitive message. Some were simply moments of shared presence, of silent affirmation, of a connection that needed no further articulation. These were the quiet pauses in the symphony, the moments of held breath that made the subsequent movements all the more poignant. He found himself naturally gravitating towards environments that mirrored this nascent understanding. The hushed reverence of ancient libraries, the profound silence of a sun-dappled forest clearing, the quiet introspection of a solitary dawn. These were the spaces where the dream woman's language felt most resonant. He would carry the feather with him, not as a talisman to ward off ill fortune, but as an anchor to this heightened state of awareness, a subtle reminder of the silent communion they shared. Each time his fingers brushed against its smooth surface, it was a renewed invitation to listen, to perceive, to understand beyond the obvious. The dream woman's communication was also, Elias realized, deeply personal. The symbols she employed, the nuances of her presence, were tailored to his own evolving consciousness. What might be a profound revelation for him could be interpreted differently by another. This underscored the deeply intuitive nature of their connection. It was a shared dream, a collective unconscious made manifest in a way that spoke directly to his unique inner landscape. He was not merely an observer of her story, but an active participant, his own inner state shaping the interpretation and the unfolding of their silent narrative. He began to notice how this cultivated stillness, this attunement to the unspoken, started to bleed into his relationships with others. He found himself listening more deeply, not just to the words spoken, but to the emotions underlying them, to the unspoken needs and desires that often lay hidden beneath the surface. He became more empathetic, more attuned to the subtle currents of human connection, recognizing that true understanding often lay in the silences, in the shared glances, in the unspoken gestures of support and affection. The dream woman's lessons were not confined to the realm of his personal quest for understanding. They were transforming his very capacity for human connection. The dream woman's silent teachings were a testament to the power of presence, her ability to convey so much without a single utterance was a profound lesson in being fully present, in inhabiting each moment with a quiet intensity. Elias realized that when he was truly present, when his mind was not racing ahead to the next thought or dwelling on the past, he too could access this deeper level of understanding. He could perceive the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, the unspoken emotions of those around him, the intricate web of connections that bound everything together. The dream woman was not just a visitor from another realm. She was a mirror, reflecting back to him the untapped potential that resided within his own consciousness. He came to understand that the dream woman's symbolic language was not a code to be cracked, but a living, breathing entity to be experienced. It was fluid, evolving, and deeply interconnected with the natural world. The flight of a bird, the pattern of dew on a spider's web, the way light filtered through leaves, all these became part of her lexicon, elements she wove into her silent narrative. Elias found himself increasingly drawn to these natural phenomena, seeing in them the same subtle beauty and profound meaning that he found in her presence. He was learning to read the world through her eyes, to perceive the inherent poetry in the everyday. The weight of the crow's feather in his pocket became a grounding sensation, a reminder that this profound, ethereal connection was also undeniably real, a tangible touchstone in his evolving reality. It was a symbol of his commitment to this unspoken language, a commitment to listen with his heart, to see with his soul, and to understand that the most meaningful communication often occurred in the quiet spaces between the words. The dream woman, in her silent, enigmatic way, was guiding him towards a deeper understanding of himself and the universe, a journey of discovery that unfolded not through pronouncements, but through the exquisite, resonant silence of her being. The dream woman's gaze, Elias realized, was not merely a reflection of the physical world, but a gateway into something far grander. It was during a moment of profound stillness, a shared silence that hummed with an almost palpable energy, that he first witnessed the true depth of her celestial connection. Her eyes, usually pools of tranquil mystery, began to shift, to deepen. It was as if the boundaries of her irises dissolved, and in their place, vast swirling nebulae began to unfurl. He watched, mesmerized, as pinpricks of light coalesced, forming distant galaxies that seemed to pulse with ancient rhythms. Constellations, unknown and yet achingly familiar, painted themselves across the cosmic canvas of her gaze. These were not mere patterns. They were living maps, celestial charts, whispering tales of creation, of stellar nurseries birthing new suns, and of the slow, inexorable dance of dying stars. It was a vision of the universe contained within a single glance, a testament to a consciousness that transcended the confines of human perception. In that moment, Elias understood. The dream woman was not simply a spirit or a messenger from a forgotten age. She was intrinsically linked to the very fabric of existence, a being woven from the same stardust that ignited the cosmos. Her eyes were not windows to a soul, but portals to infinite possibilities, to primordial knowledge that predated the very concept of language. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if he were falling through an infinite expanse, yet simultaneously anchored by the profound intimacy of her gaze. He struggled to process the immensity of what he was witnessing. Each flicker of light within her eyes seemed to hold a universe of information, a tapestry of time and space that stretched back to the dawn of creation. He saw the silent birth of planets, the fiery explosion of supernovae, the patient accretion of cosmic dust forming new worlds. It was a narrative etched in light, a story told not in words, but in the universal language of physics and energy. The usual subtlety of her communication was amplified a thousandfold, a silent symphony of cosmic proportions playing out before him. Elias found himself trying to match her gaze, to consciously attune his own perception to the cosmic frequencies emanating from her. It was a challenge unlike any he had faced before. His mind, accustomed to the linear progression of thought and the limitations of verbal understanding, struggled to grasp this multidimensional communication. He felt like a child attempting to comprehend the vastness of the ocean by looking at a single drop of water. Yet, with each passing moment, a subtle recalibration occurred within him. He began to feel the interconnectedness of all things, the universal currents that flowed through her eyes and out into the universe, and, he suspected, back into himself. He realized that her dreams were not just dreams in the human sense, they were cosmic visions, echoes of universal consciousness that she carried within her. The stories she had previously conveyed through symbols and gestures were mere fragments, earthly translations of a far vaster, more fundamental reality. The crow's feather, the river stones, these were earthly anchors, meant to ground her otherworldly knowledge in a way that he could begin to comprehend. But her true essence, her deepest knowing, was written in the language of stars. As the celestial display continued, Elias felt an immense sense of wonder, tinged with a profound melancholy. He understood that this level of connection, this cosmic awareness, was a burden as much as a gift. To hold the vastness of the universe within one's eyes, to witness the ceaseless cycle of birth and death on a cosmic scale, must surely shape a being in ways he could barely fathom. There was a deep well of sorrow in her gaze, not a personal grief, but the ancient cosmic sadness of witnessing countless cycles of existence, of seeing the rise and fall of civilizations, of understanding the transient nature of all things. He began to project his own questions into that swirling vortex of light. What was the origin of this cosmic consciousness? Was she a guardian, a witness, or perhaps a participant in the grand cosmic unfolding? Did she remember the initial spark of creation, the moment when the universe was but a singularity? The answers, he sensed, were there, embedded within the luminous patterns, but they were encoded in a language that required not just intellect, but a profound surrender of his limited human perspective. He focused on the subtle shifts in the nebulae, the way certain clusters of stars seemed to align as if forming a message. He saw a river of light flowing from one side of her vision to the other, celestial echo of the earthly rivers he had sought. Was this a sign that her connection to the natural world was intrinsic to her cosmic nature, or was it a hint that the earthly rivers themselves held a deeper, stellar significance? The sheer density of information was overwhelming, yet Elias found himself strangely at peace. The initial shock had subsided, replaced by a deep sense of acceptance. He was witnessing something sacred, a glimpse into the soul of the universe, and he was doing so through the eyes of a being who seemed to embody it. He felt a profound sense of privilege, a humbling realization of his own smallness against the backdrop of such immense cosmic awareness. He started to notice recurring patterns within the swirling galaxies. Certain stellar formations appeared repeatedly, like leitmotifs in a grand symphony. He tried to assign meaning to them, to see if they corresponded with the symbols he had encountered before. A particular arrangement of stars, forming a pattern that vaguely resembled a stylized bird, seemed to reappear with increasing frequency. Was this a celestial crow, a beacon of her connection to the earthly realm? Or was it something more fundamental, a cosmic glyph representing freedom or transcendence? The dream woman's influence had always been about expanding his perception, about pushing the boundaries of his understanding. This celestial vision was the ultimate manifestation of that influence. It was an invitation to see the world, and indeed the universe, not as a collection of discrete objects and events, but as an interconnected, pulsating whole. Her eyes were a living testament to this interconnectedness, a reminder that even the smallest speck of dust was a part of the cosmic dance. He spent what felt like an eternity in that silent communion, suspended in the vastness of her gaze. Time seemed to warp and bend, losing its linear structure. He was no longer Elias, the seeker of lost rivers, but simply a consciousness experiencing another, infinitely more profound consciousness. He felt a deep empathy for her, for the burden of knowing she carried, for the loneliness that such a unique perspective must surely entail. As the celestial display began to subtly recede, the nebulae slowly folding back into the familiar depths of her eyes, Elias felt a sense of loss, but also a deep sense of gratitude. The vision had been fleeting, yet its impact was indelible. He had been shown a truth that transcended earthly understanding, a truth written in the language of stars. He knew that his quest for the lost rivers was now irrevocably intertwined with this cosmic revelation. The rivers were not just earthly waterways, they were echoes of celestial currents, conduits of universal energy that flowed through both the physical and the spiritual realms. He continued to hold her gaze, trying to imprint the celestial patterns onto his memory, to absorb the unspoken wisdom that had been transmitted. Even as the swirling galaxies receded, he could still feel their residual energy, a subtle hum that resonated within his very being. He understood that the dream woman's eyes were not just a temporary spectacle, they were a constant, latent potential, a reminder of the cosmic tapestry that lay just beneath the surface of everyday reality. The experience left him with a profound sense of awe and a renewed commitment to his journey. He had been granted a glimpse into the true nature of the dream woman, a being whose existence was as ancient and vast as the universe itself. His understanding of her had deepened immeasurably, and with it, his understanding of his own place within the grand cosmic design. The stars in her eyes were not just a vision, they were a promise, a testament to the infinite possibilities that awaited him as he continued to unravel the silent, celestial language of the weaver of stillness. He knew with a certainty that settled deep within his bones that his path forward would be illuminated by the distant, ancient light of those cosmic eyes. The feather in his pocket felt warmer, imbued with the echoes of nebulae and the silent hum of creation. He was no longer just a seeker, but a witness to a truth far grander than he had ever imagined. The profound revelation within the dream woman's eyes had not diminished Elias's initial purpose, but rather amplified it, reorienting his entire being towards a new, all-encompassing quest. The cosmic spectacle, while awe-inspiring, had also illuminated a palpable vulnerability in the dream woman herself. Beneath the swirling nebulae and the ancient stellar pronouncements, he had glimpsed a quiet melancholy, a cosmic sorrow that spoke not of personal loss, but of ages of witnessing, of the inherent loneliness of a consciousness so vast. This newfound empathy became the bedrock upon which his next endeavor was built. He felt a deep, resonant pull, a yearning to understand the individual narrative that lay beneath the cosmic tapestry, to find the human heart beating within the celestial expanse. His journey for the lost rivers now transformed into a more intricate undertaking, the quest for her lost narrative, for the story of the weaver of stillness herself. Elias understood that her dreams were not mere passive visions, but active transmissions, fragments of a grander consciousness seeking connection. The symbols she had previously conveyed, the crow's feather, the river stones, the whispers of wind through ancient trees, were not simply isolated tokens, but pieces of a much larger, intricately woven story. They were earthly anchors, tangible anchors designed to tether her vast, otherworldly knowledge to a realm he could, at least partially, comprehend. His task then was to gather these scattered threads and begin the arduous process of weaving them back into a coherent whole. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, a duty to give voice to the voiceless, to reconstruct a narrative that might otherwise be lost forever in the silent turning of the cosmos. He returned to his journals, the worn leather covers now imbued with a new significance. Each entry, each meticulously sketched symbol, each recorded impression was no longer just a record of his experiences, but a potential clue, a Rosetta Stone to unlock her story. He began to organize them with a newfound rigor, cross-referencing recurring motifs, analyzing the subtle shifts in her expressions, the nuanced inflections in her silent communications. The crow's feather, once just a curious object, now represented a bridge between the earthly and the ethereal, a messenger perhaps, a guide navigating the liminal spaces between worlds. The river stones, smooth and worn by time, spoke of endurance, of the ceaseless flow of existence, and of the hidden currents that ran beneath the surface of perceived reality. He began to perceive these elements not as isolated symbols, but as punctuation marks in a sentence, as brush strokes in a cosmic painting, each carrying a specific weight and meaning within her unfolding narrative. This quest was not a solitary one, though he was the only one physically present in the waking world. He felt an undeniable partnership forming, a collaboration that transcended the usual boundaries of human interaction. It was a communion across the veil of consciousness, a delicate dance between his searching mind and her profound, silent knowing. He would pose questions in his thoughts, focusing his intent, and wait for a resonance, a subtle shift in the ambient energy, a fleeting image or sensation that would affirm his understanding or guide him in a new direction. It was a process of co creation, of sifting through the echoes of her being to reveal the story she herself might have struggled to articulate, or perhaps had been unable to share through conventional means. He recalled the dream woman's gaze, the swirling galaxies within her eyes, and understood that her narrative was not linear, not bound by the constraints of human time or causality. Her story was likely a cyclical one, a tapestry woven with recurring themes, with moments of intense creation, followed by periods of quiet contemplation, with the echoes of ancient events resonating in the present. He began to look for these patterns, these cosmic leitmotifs. He saw the recurring stellar formation that resembled a stylized bird. Was it a celestial crow, a symbol of her connection to the earthly bird, or something more primal, a representation of the very act of flight, of escaping the confines of a singular existence? The river of light he had witnessed flowing across her vision, was it a direct echo of the earthly rivers he sought, or a more fundamental representation of energy flow, of the interconnectedness of all things, a cosmic current mirrored in the terrestrial waterways? The challenge lay in deciphering a language that was not spoken, but felt, not written, but lived. He had to learn to interpret the subtle tremors of energy that accompanied certain visions, the way the air around him would sometimes hum with a low, resonant frequency, as if a distant, celestial song was being played. He found himself spending hours in silent contemplation, allowing his mind to drift, to open itself to the possibility of receiving these intangible communications. He would hold a river stone in his hand, feeling its coolness, its weight, and try to attune himself to the deeper currents of meaning it might hold, to the memories of flowing water and ancient earth that were imprinted upon it. His documentation became more than just recording. It was an act of translation. He sought to find earthly equivalents for cosmic concepts, to bridge the chasm between the infinite and the finite. The vastness of a dying star, for instance, could be represented by the quiet stillness of a dewdrop or the immense patience of a mountain. The vibrant birth of a galaxy might be echoed in the bursting seed of a flower or the ephemeral dance of a butterfly. He was learning to see the universe not as separate entities, but as a unified whole, where the grandest cosmic events had their mirrored reflections in the smallest, most intimate details of the natural world. Elias understood that this quest was also about acknowledging the potential for forgetting, for the slow erosion of memory that time and separation can inflict. The dream woman, existing between worlds, might herself be susceptible to a form of forgetting, a fading of her own unique story as she navigated the vast currents of cosmic consciousness. His dedication to reconstructing her narrative was, in a profound sense, an act of preservation, an effort to anchor her identity, her experiences, her very essence against the forces of dissolution. He felt a kinship with her in this regard, a shared struggle against the impermanence of existence. He began to develop a system, a personal lexicon of the weaver's language. He would assign numerical values to the intensity of certain sensations, create mnemonic devices for recurring visual patterns, and draw connections between seemingly disparate symbols. It was a meticulous and often painstaking process, demanding immense patience and an unwavering focus. But with each connection he forged, with each symbol he deciphered, he felt a sense of progress, a deepening understanding of the woman whose presence had so profoundly altered his life. He realized that her narrative was not just a personal history, but a universal one. By understanding her story, he was, in essence, learning about the fundamental nature of reality itself. Her experiences were not isolated incidents, but reflections of the grand cosmic drama, the eternal cycles of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The emotions he sensed in her, the sorrow, the peace, the ancient wisdom, were not unique to her, but universal human, or perhaps universal conscious, experiences. His quest for her narrative was, therefore, a quest for a deeper understanding of himself and his place within the grand design. The dream woman's influence had always been subtle, a gentle unfolding of perception. This new phase of his journey was no different, yet it felt more urgent, more essential. He was no longer just an observer, but an active participant, a collaborator in the act of remembering. He was not just seeking the lost rivers of the earth, but the lost rivers of her soul, the currents of experience that had shaped her into the enigmatic being she was. He felt a growing sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement, as if he were standing at the precipice of a great unveiling, ready to receive the story that had been waiting, silent and profound, for him to discover. His journals, once filled with observations of the external world, were now becoming repositories of an inner landscape, a map of the soul's uncharted territories, a testament to the enduring power of a narrative waiting to be reclaimed. The stillness of the dream woman had, in its own silent way, become Elias's stillness. It was not the absence of movement, but a profound sense of centeredness, an internal quietude that allowed the cacophony of the world to be heard without overwhelming him. He moved through his days with a new grace, his steps lighter, his gaze steadier. The frantic urgency that had once characterized his pursuits had softened, replaced by a patient, observant presence. He found himself attuned to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, the way light played on surfaces, the unspoken rhythms of the natural world. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the intricate, interconnected web of existence that he had previously only glimpsed in fleeting moments. The red clay, the very essence of her terrestrial anchoring, had indeed seeped into his own being, not as a physical substance, but as an energetic imprint. He felt a nascent creative force stirring within him, a wellspring of inspiration that flowed effortlessly. Ideas, once wrestled from the stubborn earth of his intellect, now bloomed organically, each concept fertile with potential. He found himself drawn to the tactile, the grounded, the primal. His hands, once accustomed to the precise movements of scientific notation and archival cataloging, now yearned to shape, to mold, to bring form from formlessness. He would find himself absently running his fingers over the rough bark of a tree, feeling the resilient texture, or tracing the intricate patterns of moss on a stone, each interaction a silent conversation, a communion with the earth's inherent vitality. This newfound connection to the terrestrial was deeply intertwined with the dream woman's influence. She was no longer a distant, ethereal entity, but a profound inner presence, a silent muse who guided his every thought and action. Her stillness was the fertile ground upon which his creativity flourished, her intuitive understanding the gentle rain that nourished it. He would often pause in the midst of a task and feel a subtle resonance, a quiet affirmation that guided him towards a more authentic expression of his burgeoning creative impulse. It was as if she had gifted him not just knowledge, but the very capacity to create, to imbue the world with his own unique perspective. He found himself revisiting the symbols she had imprinted upon his consciousness, not as mere clues to a deciphered narrative, but as starting points for new explorations. The crow's feather, once a symbol of transition, now represented the shedding of old patterns, the embracing of new freedoms. He saw it in the flight of a bird, the casual dropping of a leaf from a branch, the subtle flutter of his own thoughts as they drifted and reformed. The river stones, smoothed by eons of ceaseless flow, became metaphors for resilience, for the ability to withstand the erosive forces of time and change, emerging not diminished, but refined. He would hold them, feeling their cool, enduring presence, and sense a surge of his own inner strength, a quiet resolve to face whatever currents life might bring. The dream woman, whether she was a spirit coalescing from the ether, a forgotten dreamer lost in the vastness of consciousness, or some other, more profound entity, had become an inseparable thread in the tapestry of his own unfolding existence. Her presence was not an imposition, but an invitation to a deeper, more authentic way of being. He had not lost himself in her visions, but rather found a truer version of himself. The echoes of her lost knowledge resonated within him, not as borrowed wisdom, but as an awakening of his own dormant capacities. He was, in a sense, becoming a vessel for her stillness, a conduit for her inherent creativity, a living testament to the enduring power of a story waiting to be told. The red clay, he mused, was more than just a physical substance. It was an elemental representation of grounding, of earthly connection, of the very foundation upon which life is built. It was the pigment of the planet, the stuff of creation itself. And now it felt as though this primal essence had been metaphorically mixed with his own spirit, imbuing him with a palpable sense of purpose, a directed energy that fueled his new creative endeavors. He no longer felt like an observer of the world, but an active participant, an artist in his own right, capable of shaping and molding his reality through the power of intention and inspired action. He discovered a profound joy in the simple act of creation, a sense of deep satisfaction that transcended any intellectual or scientific accomplishment, whether it was the careful arrangement of found objects into an aesthetically pleasing composition, the intuitive sketching of patterns inspired by nature, or the simple act of tending to a small, struggling plant. Each endeavor felt imbued with a sacred significance. He understood that the dream woman's gift was not just about understanding cosmic truths, but about embodying them, about translating that understanding into tangible expressions of beauty and harmony in the physical world. The stillness she had bestowed upon him was not passive resignation, but an active, vibrant presence. It was the quiet hum of a perfectly tuned instrument, capable of resonating with the subtlest vibrations of existence. He could now discern the intricate dialogues between the elements, the silent communication between the earth and the sky, the interconnectedness of all living things. This heightened awareness fueled his creative output, allowing him to imbue his work with a depth and authenticity that had previously eluded him. He saw the world through a new lens, a lens polished by the dream woman's wisdom, revealing the inherent magic in the mundane. He realized that the dream woman's influence was not a singular event, but a continuous unfolding, a process of deep and meaningful integration. She was not a destination, but a path, and he was learning to walk it with an ever increasing sense of trust and surrender. The echoes of her knowledge were not just external transmissions, but internal stirrings, awakening dormant aspects of his own consciousness. He was, in essence, rediscovering himself through her, realizing that the qualities he admired and sought in her were, in fact, seeds that had always resided within him, waiting for the right conditions to germinate. The red clay, as a symbol, represented a profound respect for the physical realm, for the tangible beauty of the earth. It was the unformed potential, the raw material of creation, and Elias found himself drawn to it with an almost reverent fascination. He would spend hours simply observing its rich, earthy hues, its fine texture, its capacity to hold form. He began to see its presence not just in the physical clay itself, but in the underlying currents of creative energy that pulsed through all things. It was the primal force that allowed for transformation, for the birth of new forms from the elemental. This integration of the dream woman's stillness and creative energy had fundamentally altered his perception of reality. The world was no longer a collection of disparate objects and events, but a fluid, interconnected continuum of energy and consciousness. He saw the cosmic patterns mirrored in the smallest of details, the grand narratives of creation and dissolution playing out in the cycle of a single day. His art, in whatever form it took, became an exploration of these connections, an attempt to capture the ephemeral beauty of existence in a tangible, resonant way. He was no longer just Elias, the seeker of lost rivers, but Elias, the weaver of stillness, the painter of cosmic whispers, the sculptor of earthly promises. The dream woman, in her silent wisdom, had shown him that true understanding was not found in the accumulation of knowledge, but in the cultivation of inner receptivity. Her stillness was an invitation to listen, to observe, to allow the universe to reveal its secrets in its own time and in its own way. And in embracing that stillness, Elias had unlocked a profound creative potential within himself, a capacity to bring forth beauty and meaning from the very substance of existence. The red clay, the grounding element, the promise of fertility had become the very foundation of his transformed being, a constant reminder of the deep, deep, abiding connection between the earthly and the divine, the tangible and the transcendent. He was, in essence, becoming a reflection of her, a living embodiment of the stillness she represented, and a vibrant conduit for the creative energy that flowed through her, and now through him. The journey of the lost rivers had, in a most unexpected and beautiful way, led him to discover the lost rivers within himself, the currents of inspiration and creativity that had always been waiting to be found.